Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Aaron Barley. Kindness is not just a gift given, but sometimes also a double-edged sword if misplaced. When compassion is betrayed, will what we give become the seeds of a tragedy? Peter Wilkinson, 47, and his wife, Tracy, 50, lived in Stourbridge, in the English county of Westminster. They had two children, a daughter, Lydia, who studied biology at Bristol University, and a son, Pierce, who was 13. Despite the fact that Lydia was much older and studying at university, away from the family, the brother and sister communicated every day and shared an extremely close relationship. Tracy Wilkinson was a generous and compassionate woman. A former Latin American champion in ballroom dancing, she became a volunteer to work with elderly people and could talk to anyone to make them feel at ease. She often helped the homeless and never refused to assist those in need. Tracy was a housewife while her husband had his own business. One day in March 2016, Tracy went to the supermarket to do her weekly shopping. After leaving, she noticed a young man named Aaron Barley who was sleeping on the street in a cardboard box. Seeing how he suffered from his situation, Tracy felt sorry for him and decided to invite him to her home on Greyhound Lane. Aaron had dinner with the Wilkinson family, and Tracy decided to do everything in her power to help him get back on his feet. She took Aaron to the city council office, and with their help, he managed to find new housing in a hostel. From that moment, Tracy always tried to ensure that Aaron had hot and fresh food. Such care and concern were extremely rare for Aaron, as his life had been chaotic from the very beginning. Born in 1993 as a result of incest, his parents were his uncle and niece, with a 19-year age difference. His mother worked in a factory, and his father was an innkeeper. By the age of 10, Aaron became an orphan. His father died of cancer when he was 4, and 2 years later, his mother had a heart attack, leading him to spend his entire childhood in orphanages and various foster families. During this period, he faced violence. When Aaron was 13 years old, he is at the center of an investigation into a missing person case, and his photo was circulated in the media after he went missing, with 2 boys in Bromsgrove. Luckily, he was found and received proper medical care. As Aaron got older, he started sleeping on the streets. He also became addicted to banned substance and alcohol. However, it seemed that after meeting Tracy, his life started to improve. He appeared grateful for the help and support. Meanwhile, the Wilkinson family decided to do whatever it took to help him get through life is hard. One day during dinner with Wilkinson family, Aaron said that he just needed someone to give him a chance. Tracy herself has struggled with alcoholism in the past and was now volunteering at a rehab center that had helped her overcome it. She knew from her own experience how debilitating addiction could be and wanted to do everything she could to help him. Peter decided to get Aaron a job as a laborer at one of his businesses in Newport. For 5 months, it seemed that Aaron's life was getting better. He had a steady income, a roof over his head, and a family that truly cared about him. But soon, everything fell apart. In September, Aaron relapsed and started using illegal substances again. He explained that the reason was because his mother had recently passed away, but this was a complete lie. He became constantly drunk, stopped showing up for work on time, and exhibited aggression towards other employees. Peter decided to fire him. Everything ended peacefully, and the Wilkinson family lost contact with him. After only a couple of months, Peter found Aaron sleeping next to their house, covered in bruises, which indicated that he had been attacked. They decided to give Aaron another chance, helped him find a new place to live, and he earned money doing odd jobs for them. He spent Christmas with them and gave Tracy a card signed, "For the mother I never had." For the new year, Aaron had a new flat in Brierley Hill, and he now had a full-time job. A couple of times a week, he had dinner with the Wilkinson family, and it seemed that everything was getting better. Unfortunately, soon after, Aaron was fired from his job as a furniture polisher, and he lost his home. The Wilkinsons allowed him to stay with them again for 2 weeks until he found a job. On March 26, 2017, Lydia returned home from university and surprised her mother by hiding in the family Land Rover for Mother's Day. When Tracy opened the trunk and saw Lydia, they both cried tears of joy at their reunion. What a pity, Lydia's visit was brief, as she soon had to leave for Bristol to continue her studies. Just 4 days later, on March 30, 2017, at around 10:00 a.m., Lydia received a distressing call from her boyfriend informing her that a crime had occurred in her hometown. Upon reading the news, Lydia saw images of her house surrounded by police tape and emergency services. Alarmed, she immediately contacted the police to learn what had happened, and the news she received was horrifying. That day, Peter had taken his greyhound, Mendy, for their usual morning walk. Leaving Tracy and Pierce at home, he had invited Pierce to join him, but Pierce declined, saying he would walk later. When Peter returned home, he noticed the house was unusually quiet, and there was no tea on the kitchen table, a routine his wife usually followed. As Peter entered the house, a man wearing a balaclava attacked him from behind the kitchen wall, raising a knife over his head. Peter suffered 6 stab wounds, 2 in his back, 2 in his stomach, and 2 in his face. During the assault, the attacker screamed, "Die," and curse. Although the attacker was trying to conceal his identity with the mask, Peter instantly recognized him. After the first stab, Peter pleaded, "We are trying to help you." But he responded with increasing rage, then shouting again, "Die," as he delivered another blow to Peter's stomach. Following the attack, Aaron stole the Wilkinsons' Land Rover parked outside and drove away. Despite serious injuries, Peter managed to call 911 and made his way to the garden, collapsing on a chair. Emergency services arrived in just 7 minutes. 2 ambulances and 2 helicopters were dispatched to quickly take the victims to hospital. When the police and medical staff arrived, they encountered a horrific scene inside the house. Peter directed them to Tracy and Pierce to check on their well-being. Police comments: Tracy had been stabbed at least 17 times and was found naked in her bedroom under a duvet, indicating she had been attacked while she was sleeping. She was pronounced dead at the crime scene. Her son, Pierce, suffered 8 stab wounds, one of which was so severe that it nearly ruptured his back. He was found gasping for air on the floor. Right away, Peter and Pierce was rushed to Birmingham for medical attention, but sadly, Peter lost both his wife and son. After police tracked the Wilkinson family's car, they quickly located Aaron. So, he was quickly apprehended. Why? A bloody knife wrapped in a wet shirt was also discovered in the car. For Lydia, the unfolding nightmare was unimaginable. She had planned to return home the following day to choose a dress for the university ball and had promised Pierce she would pick him up from school. Now, all those plans would never come to fruition. As soon as she arrived in her hometown, she went directly to her father before his life-saving surgery. Seeing him in the hospital, surrounded by medical equipment and tubes, was heartbreaking. While Peter fought for his life, Lydia had the painful task of identifying the bodies of her younger brother and mother. Lydia recalled, "I went into the house and sat with my mom and brother. I told them I was sorry I couldn't protect them and stroked their hair. I decided to stay there for a while because I knew it would be the last time I would see them." After the doctor's efforts, Peter survived and spent a total of 11 days in the hospital, 6 of which were in intensive care. The community in Stonebridge was shocked by such a horrific event in their town. In a show of respect, flowers were placed around Wilkinson's house. Many people came to express their sorrow. Meanwhile, the police obtained surveillance camera footage from Wilkinson's house, revealing a disturbing sequence of events. The footage showed Aaron climbing over the fence into the garden behind the house. He had been hiding in the garden shed all night after failing to break into the house. In the morning, he waited for Peter to leave for his usual walk, then crawled into the house on all fours to avoid detection. Once inside, he put on a balaclava to conceal his identity, took 2 knives from the kitchen, and went upstairs. There, he brutally stabbed Tracy multiple times in her bed and did the same to Pierce. After the attack, he hid to waiting for Peter to return. After the murder, Aaron showed no remorse. He told a police officer, "I stabbed 3 people. I didn't even bother to take any of you. He also mentioned to the police officer that he had chopped them all up and insisted he wouldn't require a lawyer. Additionally, Aaron declined to take a toxicology test that could have established if he was under the influence of banned substance that morning. He also refused to explain his motives. While in custody, he boasted about killing a mother and her son and expressed satisfaction that they were dead. His only regret was failing to kill Peter. One uncertainty is why he committed this crime. Less than a week before the murder, the Wilkinson family ended their contract with Aaron's phone service because he hadn't contacted them for 3 weeks. Tracy had also mentioned to friends that she saw Aaron peering over their garden fence and had wished for his disappearance from their lives. Investigators said, Aaron has a long history of violent and antisocial behavior. At the age of 11, he was abandoned by his foster family because of his aggressive actions towards other children. As he grew older, his violence escalated, particularly towards residents in the nursing home where he lived, and he claimed to be very disturbed. He frequently got into fights and even stole a staff member's car. At one point, he made a list of people he wanted to kill. Aaron has 21 prior convictions, the first occurring when he was just 12 years old for causing serious injury. His other offenses include assaulting a police officer, using illegal banned substance, and possessing illegal weapons. He once attacked his ex-girlfriend with a piece of wood, hitting her 50 times, and attempted to stab her after she broke the wood in half. For this assault, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison at the age of 18. Volunteers at the rehabilitation center where Aaron was held reported that he expressed a desire to kill someone with a knife. They also noted that he had 2 main goals: to kill a prison officer and to kill a police officer. However, his comments were largely dismissed since they believed he made these statements while under the influence of illegal banned substance. Before, he attended a special school, but his social interactions were limited, as everyone who knew him avoided him. Additionally, a police report was filed against him after his former foster guardian became alarmed by his Facebook posts. In one of these posts, he threatened his former family, with whom he claimed he hadn't spoken in years, and expressed a desire for specialized help, warning that he might commit mass murder if he didn't receive it. In February 2017, just a month before he murdered the Wilkinson family, he met with a project employee for support. This employee concluded that Aaron sought to manipulate the people around him and to have absolute control over them, calculating every step he took. In one of his text messages, Aaron wrote that he was a beast, adding, "Stay a beast, change the victim." On Wednesday, June 7, 2017, Pierce and Tracy Wilkinson's funeral was held at St. Mary's Church. Lydia and Peter decided to bury both of their loved ones in the same coffin. The priest who presided over the ceremony was moved to say, "You may be surprised to see only one coffin, but they are forever inseparable, just as they were together when they were alive." On the first day of his trial at Birmingham Crown Court, Aaron pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. As the judge read the charges against him, Aaron rocked back and forth in the dock and shouted, "I did what I did. I don't have to stand here and lie." Psychiatric evaluations found no grounds for mitigating Aaron Barley's guilt. Prosecutor Kareem Khalil described Aaron as deceitful and manipulative. One of Aaron's former caregivers noted that he could be sensitive and caring, but he could also be cruel and threatening. A former resident of the nursing home where Aaron lived said that, aside from anger, he rarely showed any emotion. They never saw Aaron cry and noted that he rarely seemed affected by anything that happened around him. They observed that Aaron was the type of person who could witness terrible things happening and still stand still, not crying, not worrying. He seemed physically present, but completely detached emotionally. Aaron's attorney argued that Aaron's childhood was unstable, preventing him from staying in one place for long. He claimed that Aaron had borderline personality disorder and felt abandoned by his family. However, this diagnosis was never confirmed because it was widely acknowledged that the Wilkinson family had treated him with exceptional kindness. In court, Lydia Wilkinson confronted Aaron, stating, "My parents helped you, and you repay them with emotional suffering. You ruined lives and took half of my family away. I have become a shadow of my former self. Sometimes I wake up wishing I wasn't here. What did they do to deserve such a fate?" She also expressed that she would never forgive Aaron for his actions. After her statement, it appeared that Aaron began to cry and softly said, "And I'm very sorry." The judge commended Lydia for her courage and maturity, noting that she had shown strength beyond her years. However, he pointed out that Lydia was struggling with anxiety attacks and could no longer be left alone. Peter, who also testified, expressed confusion about Aaron's actions, saying, "We have no explanation for what he did. He chose to take out his frustrations on the people who cared for him. I wish I had never met him. I wish my wife hadn't seen him in the cardboard box." Aaron Barley was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years before he would be eligible for parole. While the judge gave him this opportunity, she also warned him that Aaron might never be released, depending entirely on his behavior and rehabilitation while serving his sentence. However, Aaron remained expressionless throughout the trial, showing no reaction. The three-judge panel then decided to increase the minimum sentence to 35 years, reflecting the severity of Aaron's crimes. Now, Aaron will only be eligible for parole after serving at least 35 years and proving that he is no longer a threat to society. Whether or not he will ever be free is a question that only time will tell. Peter and Lydia continued to live in their home on Greyhound Lane. Peter said, "This is our home, and we couldn't let him take anything else away from us. We love this house. It's like a family home that we built ourselves, and we love living here." They also received support from a local priest, who blessed each room in the house. Lydia returned to university with the hope of becoming a medical researcher. She said she wanted to continue the work her mother would do, helping and supporting others, and that it was important to her to focus her energy on making something positive out of the tragedy. Lydia raised £133,000 British pound for Birmingham Children's Hospital, which fought so hard to save her brother's life. While the loss of Tracy and Pierce can never be replaced, but their legacy will live on through the children that Lydia's organizations have cared for. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Jacobson family. Neil Jacobson was born in 1961 to Harold Jacobs, a former Marine, and Goldie, a homemaker. He had two sisters, Deborah and Robin. Although the parents were strict, they also loved their children very much. Despite the outward calm, but Neil's parents faced some challenges. His mother struggled with lifelong depression, managed with medication and therapy. On the contrary, his father is a calm person and a reliable support for the family, but sometimes he cannot avoid moments of breakdown. Neil also faced mental health issues, likely inherited from his mother, and tried to meet the high standards set by his parents. His sisters, however, seemed unaffected by psychological issues. Neighbors saw family members treating each other with respect and love. Neil's first serious problems began after he was admitted to Montclair State University. He successfully completed his initial years, but each new stage became increasingly difficult. Additionally, he took a job to support himself. He tried his best to manage the workload from both his studies and his job, while also wanting to make his parents proud. However, at times, he couldn't handle it. As a result, just before earning his bachelor's degree, he suffered a breakdown and dropped out of school. Despite facing psychological difficulties and strictness from his parents, he still received support from his father. Yet, it was always very hard for him to accept that he couldn't live up to his parent example. Neil's relationships with women were often complicated and not smooth. However, when he was 29, he met Frankie at the gym. She was 33 at the time. He worked on Long Island, while Frankie worked on Wall Street. Their shared profession as stockbrokers brought them together. They both lived in the same residential complex in Queens, New York. Initially friends, they gradually began dating. Their mutual interests and activities drew them closer. They spent many weekends together over the years. Diving, cycling, and other sports. Their relationship was genuinely happy, as noted by all their friends. On New Year's Eve in 1989, they announced their engagement, and by the end of July 1991, they were married. They decided to start their own business. Neil opened a mortgage brokerage firm in 1993, and a few years later, Frankie left her job to join him in growing the company. Their business prospered, and by 2002, they were able to purchase a luxury home. Not everything went smoothly for them. They always wanted children, but Frankie couldn't get pregnant. She was undergoing infertility treatment for a long time, and finally, a miracle happened. She became pregnant and gave birth to twins, Eric and Joshua, in 2003. The two boys are a great couple and support each other well. Joshua had speech difficulties, but they did everything to support the boy. He attended specialized therapy that their wealth allowed them to afford. During this time, Neil grew tired of the weather in New Jersey, where their mansion was located. In addition, his father Harold's health was deteriorating, and it was difficult for him to visit them because of the distance. To be closer to his father, he decided to move to Florida. He bought 4 properties in the Palm Beach area, 3 condos, and a dream home worth about $1 million. He sees apartments as a good business opportunity to earn rental income. Neil started planning to move, but Frankie was not excited about it. She enjoyed their current home because her family, friends, and business were there, and their children were still young. She did not want to leave, which caused some disagreements between them. However, they managed to work through these difficulties. Neil didn't pressure she to move immediately. Instead, he gave her time to consider it. During a vacation, they visited their dream house, which was still unfurnished, so they slept on air mattresses and gradually got used to the place. Frankie eventually grew fond of it. A few years later, she was ready to move. By July 2007, they relocated to Florida with their children. The children got involved in sports and achieved their first successes. Besides taking care of the children and managing the household, Frankie was also creative and worked on writing a children's book. However, in 2008, their family began to face serious problems. At that time, the real estate market bubble burst, causing a financial crisis that affected many other sectors. The apartments did not generate the income Neil had anticipated, investments did not pay off, previous deals failed, and new purchases were unsuccessful. Consequently, Neil found himself unable to repay the loans he had taken out. Neil, once a successful businessman with over $2 million in capital, is now facing the same amount of debt, and he is struggling to overcome this financial difficulty. During this challenging time, Neil's father passed away, adding more pressure to the family. He had to sell assets for very low prices, yet still faced a substantial debt of $1 million. The ongoing crisis left them with almost no income, and they felt lost about what to do next. They were at risk of losing everything, and this situation seriously affected Neil's health. Then, doctors detected issues with Neil's thyroid gland, although tests only showed a slight hormone imbalance. The doctor chose not to address it immediately, hoping it would improve over time. However, his condition became much worse, particularly affecting his mental health. Shortly after Christmas 2009, he felt unwell, experiencing dizziness and weakness. On January 2, 2010, Frankie took him to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed him with depression and prescribed strong antidepressants, Zoloft and Cias. After a second doctor visit, he was also prescribed the sedative Oxynax, but his condition did not improve, leading him to see a psychiatrist. During his first meeting with the new doctor, Neil reported frequent panic attacks related to the real estate market collapse. Although he had no obvious symptoms that required previously prescribed medications, he did show signs of anxiety. Instead of reducing or changing his medication, the doctor increased the dosage, which led to further deterioration of his condition and the emergence of alarming symptoms. Frankie told her sister, Neela, that Neil experienced periodic hallucinations and had trouble sleeping. He often behaved inappropriately, seemed disoriented, and felt lost. He was convinced that FBI agents were monitoring him because of his debts. He believed that he and Frankie would be imprisoned and that their children would be placed in foster care. All of his relatives knew that he wasn't being watched, but they couldn't convince him otherwise. He was truly paranoid. Neil became withdrawn, staying awake at night waiting for Frankie to wake up, and spent his days following her around, constantly talking about his fears. He couldn't handle the gaze of strangers, so he almost completely stopped going outside, fearing he was being pursued by the FBI. One notable incident that showed Neil's paranoia happened when Frankie managed to get him to go to the gym. She believed that exercise could improve his overall health, including his mental health. However, even before getting on the exercise bike, Neil's heart rate skyrocketed to 200 beats per minute due to his anxiety. This heart rate was dangerously high for his age, so they had to stop the workout to avoid risking his health. Neil's condition was deteriorating, yet he continued taking high doses of medication. About 3 weeks before the incident, he went out alone to enjoy the fresh air. Without waiting for his family, he got into his car and drove off. Luckily, he didn't get far. After driving for a while, he crashed into a barrier at an intersection. Disoriented, he exited the car and began acting inappropriately. A passing driver noticed his odd behavior and called 911 to alert the police. Then, the night January 22, 2010, Neil hid a gun on the top shelf of his bedroom closet. It was a Smith & Wesson revolver, next to an open box of .38 Winchester cartridges and a letter he had opened 3 days earlier. 3 rifles were also concealed in nearby drawers. A birthday party for Neil's twin sons, Joshua and Eric, was planned for January 23. Family and friends would gather for the party, play laser tag and take souvenir photos. Unfortunately, the children never arrived at this party as they were soon tragically shot. Around 6 a.m. on January 23, 2010, while everyone was still asleep, a tragedy unfolded, just hours before the party. Neil woke up, retrieved a gun from the closet, and his wife Frankie heard the noise. Frankie was half awake, not understanding what was happening in the next room, so she called her husband, Neil, and asked him what he was doing. Neil emerged from the dressing room holding a gun and pointed it at Frankie's, 53 years old. He told her that it was over and there was no other way. Terrified, she pleaded with him not to do it, insisting that she wanted to live and asked about their children. Neil persistently told her that there was no other solution and that they all needed to go to another world. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Realizing he was serious, she rushed at him, in an attempt to take the gun from him to protect herself and their children. A life and death struggle broke out between them, and they fell to the floor. Frankie fought with all her strength to take the gun and save herself and the children, but her efforts were in vain. Neil was stronger. He managed to wrest the gun from her grasp and shot her twice in the face, killing she instantly. During the struggle, she suffered several injuries, including a knocked-out front tooth and cuts on her fingers. Then, Neil reloaded the gun, put more bullets in his pocket, and went to the children's room at the other end of the house. First, Neil went to Eric's room, where his son was still sleeping soundly and didn't hear the gunshots. Neil, without hesitation, raised the gun and aimed it at his son's head. He shot Eric twice in the face, causing blood to splatter up to the ceiling and cover the surrounding walls. Although Eric did not die immediately. but the boy began to moan and choke on his own blood. Neil then pressed a pillow to his son's face and fired 2 more shots. At this time, the boy showed no signs of life, and Neil concluded it was over. He reloaded the weapon and went to Joshua's room. Like Eric, Joshua was still fast asleep and did not hear a thing. Neil placed a pillow on Joshua's right cheek and shot him twice in the face. The boy didn't react. Neil checked to ensure the boy was dead, then he leaving the room. He returned to the bedroom, past Frankie's body, and went into the bathroom to wash the blood off his face and hands. Afterward, he took his car keys and attempted to rouse his deceased family members, telling each of them to come on quickly and adding that if they didn't get up, he would have to leave without them. Of course, none of them responded. The ambulance arrived at the scene. Neil was covered in blood, but only suffered minor injuries from the accident that occurred earlier. The officers attempted to speak with he. During a brief and unclear conversation, he repeatedly tried to find his gun and acted suspiciously. The police confiscated the gun and continued questioning him. During the conversation, he confessed to killing his family. He was detained until the incident could be clarified. The detectives quickly began their investigation. They went to the Jacobson family home in Wellington, Florida, near Palm Beach, to verify his statement, where they discovered a horrific scene: 3 bodies inside the house. The crime scene was undisturbed, with bodies in various locations throughout the home. There was a lot of blood, and all 3 family members were dead. Forensic experts started examining the house, while detectives interrogated Neil at the local police station, allowing them to piece together the incident of that terrible morning. During his conversations with detectives, Neil frequently referred to his suicide note. In this 5-page typewritten letter, he detailed the reasons for his planned murder and end his life. He wrote that he could no longer live like this. Everything in their lives was spiraling out of control. He felt it was necessary to kill his entire family and himself to prevent them from suffering due to his poor business decisions. The letter also revealed that he intended to visit his mother and kill her. This was confirmed when police searched his car and found the keys to his mother's house, which he had brought with him. He was heading towards her house when the accident occurred. The police thought Neil didn't mean to end his life. Instead, he lost control after taking medication and crashed. However, his mother disagreed, she believing he wasn't a threat. She blamed the bloody incident on January 23 on incorrect prescriptions from doctors, saying the medication was too strong and caused Neil to lose control of his actions. During questioning, Neil said on January 23, 2010, while his family was celebrating their children's birthdays, a special force arrested him. However, the 2 children Joshua and Eric did not survive to see their birthday party. This horrific case has shocked the entire town of Wellington. Many people close to the family and neighbors could not believe that Neil, a respected businessman, could do such a thing to his family. The defense argued that the murder was committed due to insanity, so Neil was sent for a psychiatric evaluation. While in prison, he met with psychiatrists multiple times. His mental state was very unstable. Sometimes he showed no emotions and seemed detached from reality, while other times he lost control and became hysterical, especially when he remembered his actions. In prison, doctors diagnosed him with deep depression and prescribed different medications. Initially, he seemed to improve, and his condition stabilized. However, after a few weeks, the psychiatrist stopped the treatment because his body reacted poorly to the medication. However, a subsequent examination revealed that, due to a medical error, Neil did not receive treatment for his main illness, hypothyroidism, related to the thyroid gland and hormonal balance. In this context, apathy, depression, and anxiety are very likely. It was determined that he was prescribed powerful psychotropic drugs without official justification, not even a complete psychiatric examination was conducted. Furthermore, it was found that the doses of the prescribed medications he took could indeed cause the hallucinations and disorders that he experienced. Neil deeply loved his family. He and his wife were not only married but also best friends. He never did anything wrong with his wife and children and was devoted to them. However, he was severely impacted by the financial crisis, leg problems, and his father's death, and his treatment was ineffective. Neil claimed that he wasn't the one who harmed his family. During the 3 weeks he was on medication, he changed significantly, sleeping only 2 hours a day. One day, the medication had a severe effect on Neil's, making his brain feel like it was burning. That morning, he woke up hearing voices in his head commanding him. Initially, he resisted, but the voices became louder and more persistent. He genuinely believed that killing his entire family was the only way to protect them from the FBI. Prosecutors are asking for the sentence of death under Florida law. However, many of Neil's relatives, including his lawyer, opposed such a severe punishment. They supported Neil, noting that before the tragic incident, he had never been cruel. Although he appeared worried and stressed about financial matters, but his family did not believe he was capable of such a violent act. The defense argued that a medical error led to the wrong treatment, and they demanded that the doctors be held accountable for the tragedy. The Palm Beach prosecutor mentioned that 2 copies of a suicide note had been discovered in the Jacobson family home. The note expressed love for the family and expressed feeling overwhelmed by their current circumstances. It stated that due to his short-sightedness, he had placed the family in a position of losing everything they had built. He admitted to participating in the real estate investment craze and felt confused about his actions. The note conveyed his desire not to leave his family in poverty and his inability to let them live in such conditions. He admitted that anxiety was consuming him and expressed shame. The first note was dated January 20th, and the second January 23rd, the same day as the triple homicide. This is considered evidence to classify the murder as premeditated, showing that he had planned his actions. Despite acting impulsively, but he admitted to having brought weapons home in advance and hiding them in the dressing room. Frankie was unaware of the presence of a pistol in the house and had no knowledge of the tragic incident that were to occur that morning. Neil had a clear memory of all the incident and was able to describe them in detail. A few days before the incident, Neil's mother visited him. During her visit, Neil repeatedly hugged her and said her that he loved her no matter what happened. This behavior raised doubts about his mental state. Despite this, the Frankie family viewed Neil as a coward and cruel man for allowing evil to take control and lead to the death of his entire family. The defense argued that Neil's inappropriate behavior, such as waking up and immediately rushing to the weapon closet, suggested a mental disorder. They claimed he was influenced by voices and experienced a breakdown due to medication. Friends and relatives confirmed these claims. Subsequently, an independent psychiatric examination diagnosed Neil with bipolar disorder type 2 and several other serious mental issues. These findings led to him being deemed insane at the time of the crime. Nonetheless, the lawyers believed the jury would not accept this insanity defense and advised Neil to negotiate a plea deal with the prosecution. To avoid the death penalty, Neil agreed to a deal. Consequently, in February 2012, he pleaded guilty to murdering 3 people. His death penalty was replaced with 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Initially, he was under special supervision by prison guards, which is common in cases with a high risk of end his life. Neil attempted to end his life 3 times, feeling he had nothing left to live for, but each time he was saved. As part of the plea bargain, his relatives are allowed to visit him twice a year. In prison, he works as a clerk in the library, helping prisoners choose books and find information. Fellow prisoners say that Neil cries every day in his cell when he is alone, regretting his actions. Before the verdict, he often stated that he was indifferent to the death penalty and even expected it as a form of release. For someone who was once a loving husband and father, living with this overwhelming guilt is unbearable. This year, his wife Frankie would have turned 78, and their children Eric and Joshua would have been 32. Instead, they will forever remain 53 and 7, buried together in one grave. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ilona Flint. On December 23, 2013, 22-year-old Ilona Flint finished her shift at a shopping center store, where she often worked late during the Christmas season. This night, she left work just after midnight, expecting her boyfriend to pick her up from the parking lot. However, he did not arrive and did not respond to her messages. Concerned, she reached out to her boyfriend's brother, whom she got along with well, and asked him for a ride home. He agreed to help her, but unfortunately, they never made it home. On that fateful night, a dangerous criminal chose to practice his murderous skills by targeting the Belvedere family. This decision led to a terrible tragedy. The Belvedere family was well respected and had a reputation for being good, honest, and crime-free. Ilona had just moved to San Diego, California, where she was lively, energetic, and determined. Love had blossomed between her and Gianni Belvedere, and they had announced their engagement shortly before the tragedy. They loved each other and were eager to start a family together. Gianni's parents had become very close to Ilona. They treated her like their own daughter, and they had a wonderful relationship from the very beginning. All of this contributed to their belief in a bright future for the couple. Not even their brightest dreams could protect them from the violent criminals of 2013. A shooting broke out in the parking lot of the Minville Shopping Center in San Diego. One of the store employees noticed a suspicious person and called the police. Before that, Ilona Flint frantically dialed 911, telling the dispatcher that a stranger was threatening her. The driver of the car she was in was her boyfriend's 2-year-old brother, Salvatore Belvedere. Suddenly, the call with Ilona was interrupted. The dispatcher sent patrol officers to the area to investigate. In just a few minutes, the patrol arrived at the incident scene. Inside the car, they found Ilona and Salvatore unconscious. Ilona was slumped in the front passenger seat, and police identified 2 gunshot wounds on her body, one in her chest and another in the back of her head, which was fatal. Despite brief tries to revive her, it became evident that Ilona would not wake up. Doctors later confirmed her death, noting that the assailant had shot both her and the driver while Ilona was on the phone. During the call with the dispatcher, no background noise or gunshots were heard. Police reviewed the call recording and interviewed the witness who reported the incident. She also did not hear any loud noises. As a result, police believe the attacker used a pistol with a silencer. The investigation confirmed that the assassin had a .22 caliber pistol. The boy, Salvatore, was in critical condition after being shot in the face, right between the eyes. When police arrived, he was still alive and was rushed to the hospital. Despite the doctor's efforts to save him, he fell into a coma and died 2 days later. This left the police without any valuable information from him. Forensic experts started by examining the vehicle where the Ilona and Salvatore were shot. Sadly, they found no evidence of a third person either inside or outside the car. They discovered that the vehicle in which Ilona and Salvatore were found belonged to Leonardo Belvedere, Salvatore's father. Police intended to inform the car owner about the tragic incident and also wanted to speak with Gianni, Ilona's new fiancé. However, they could not find Gianni at his home. Leonardo went to the shopping mall where the incident occurred and waited for news of Gianni. Leonardo was the first to notice that something was wrong. Gianni usually arrived at the mall early and waited for Ilona in the parking lot, so his absence caused concern. Leonardo tried to call him, but Gianni did not answer any calls or messages, which was completely unlike him. This unusual behavior prompted Leonardo to go looking for his son. The police issued a notice for Gianni in his green Toyota Camry. There was suspicion that Gianni was involved in the murder of Ilona and her brother Salvatore, possibly due to a conflict between young people that led to the tragedy. The search for Gianni in his car began throughout the city, as the police had a number of questions for him. They needed to determine if his girlfriend Ilona had any disputes with anyone that could have endangered her life. And they also needed to confirm his alibi. To get those answers, the police had to speak directly with Gianni. The first clue had emerged. Police had received information from dispatchers that could lead to a suspect. Police learned that shortly after Ilona contacted emergency services, a mall employee had called to report seeing a suspicious vehicle with an unknown man standing next to it. The man, who appeared to be of average height, was standing behind the driver's side window of the one vehicle. Although the witness did not hear any gunshots, screams, or signs of a struggle, she found the man's behavior unusual. He made some strange gestures before quickly returning to his car. Fortunately, the witness had taken a good look at the vehicle and provided police with a detailed description. The vehicle was very similar to the one Gianni had been driving when he went missing. At this point, police began to consider Ilona's fiancé, Gianni, as a prime suspect, as he was likely present at the crime scene. Police obtained surveillance footage, which further strengthened their belief in the reliability of an eyewitness account of the shooter. Based on the recordings, they created a description to help identify the suspect, a man of unknown race, of average height, wearing brown pants and a shirt with some resemblance to Gianni. This raised concerns for police, as it suggested a possible love triangle. Police speculated that Gianni had discovered Ilona and Salvatore's affair. It is believed that Gianni may have encountered them in the parking lot of a shopping mall. In a fit of rage, he is believed to have shot both of them with a pistol equipped with a silencer before fleeing the scene. While this scenario is common in love triangles, it remains a theory that needs to be confirmed. Friends of the couple have dismissed the police theories, insisting that Ilona had nothing to do with Salvatore. They believe that she was deeply in love with Gianni and that both young people were victims of an attack by an unknown assailant, while Gianni had nothing to do with the crime. There is even the possibility that he was kidnapped. Even with this testimony, the police still did not rule out Gianni as a suspect. The police returned to speak with Leonardo, the father of the Belvedere family. The police informed Leonardo that Gianni was considered one of the prime suspects in the case. However, for Gianni's family and friends, this was hard to believe. They could not imagine him being involved in any kind of heinous act. Gianni had always been a well-mannered and calm person. He did not associate with troublemakers. He was known for his intelligence, optimism, and ambitious plans for the future, including with his beloved Ilona. The idea that he could have resorted to violence against his own brother and fiancé seemed completely absurd. While the police searched for Gianni, his family reached out to him through the media, believing there had been a misunderstanding and that he would return home soon. Despite suspicions surrounding him, his mother and sister encouraged him to come back to clear his name. They also appealed to anyone who might have information about Gianni's whereabouts. Unfortunately, they received no significant leads. Police explored the possibility that someone else might be involved in the murders of the two young victims, yet they felt it was important to keep an eye on Gianni for any possible threats. They also looked into the involvement of organized crime, considering whether the victims might have been gang members or had connections to drug activities and deaths. However, there was no evidence linking them to illegal substances or criminal activity. Toxicology reports showed no traces of alcohol or drugs in their body, and neither had a criminal record or enemies who wanted to harm them. The crime appeared to be planned specifically targeting Ilona and Salvatore. The perpetrator acted with determination and confidence, leading police to dismiss the idea that the victims were simply random targets of a violent attack. Despite this, none of Gianni's acquaintances believed he could have carried out such a brutal crime. Nevertheless, police remained convinced that the incidents were closely tied to him and found his disappearance highly suspicious. Police decided to investigate the Gianni's mobile phone history. They found that his phone had been turned off at 11:45 p.m. on the night of the double murder and had not been turned back on since. Gianni's last call was to his cousin. The police contacted this relative to gather more information about their conversation that evening. The cousin confirmed that Gianni had called him but mentioned that nothing unusual was discussed. They casually chatted and Gianni simply mentioned he was going to the mall to pick up Ilona, as he usually did. That concluded their conversation. Ilona did not enjoy driving, despite having a driver's license, so Gianni always picked her up after work. Police were able to access Ilona's cell phone records, who was found dead in the mall parking lot. They discovered that shortly before her death, she had sent several text messages to Gianni, but he had ignored them. Ilona attempted to contact him after 2:45 p.m. but no one answered. She then called Gianni's brother Salvatore, asking him to pick her up from the parking lot. Salvatore agreed and drove to her location. It was revealed that they had been in a car in the parking lot from midnight to 1 a.m. Ilona was very worried about Gianni, prompting her to call friends, acquaintances, the local hospital, and the morgue to find him. This behavior was unusual for her, suggesting that she was increasingly worried that he might have had an accident on the way to the mall. On January 17, 2014, the police received an important tip in the case. A witness reported seeing a suspicious car parked near her home for an extended period. The abandoned vehicle was identified as Gianni's Toyota Camry, located in a remote area of Riverside, San Diego. The police were alarmed by a foul odor coming from the car, which piqued their interest. They quickly arrived at the scene and checked the car's license plates against their database, discovering that the plates were fake. Upon further investigation, they found out that the car belonged to the missing person, Gianni. Officers entered the car and noticed blood on the passenger seat, which was a concerning sign. While inspecting the vehicle, they also detected a strong odor of decomposition, particularly near the trunk. The police recognized this smell, indicating that a body was nearby. Unfortunately, they discovered the body of a person, believed to be Gianni, in an advanced state of decomposition. Due to the hot weather, dental records were needed for identification. A forensic expert confirmed the police suspicions. It was indeed Gianni. After the identification, the victim's family was informed of the tragic news. They were devastated, as they had held on to hope that their son would be safe. The police were faced with a serious situation. Who would want to harm these young individuals? A forensic examination revealed that Gianni had been dead for approximately 3 weeks before he was discovered. A bullet was found in his skull, which was the cause of Gianni's death. Based on the position of the body and the nature of the wounds, it appeared that the shooter was on his side when the shot was fired. The bullet entered behind Gianni's left ear, causing fatal injuries. He died of blood loss. Police analyzed the bullet that killed Gianni and matched it to the bullets that killed Salvatore and Ilona. Ballistics tests confirmed that all the bullets were fired from the same type of weapon. It is possible that all the victims were killed by the same person. Could it have been an accident? A deliberate crime resulted in the deaths of the young people. But the theory of a love triangle was eventually ruled out. The police decided to start their investigation from scratch. In the trunk of Gianni's car, forensic experts discovered several empty air freshener cans. These had been left behind by the attacker after repinning the buttons. This may have been an attempt to hide the smell of decomposition from the car for as long as possible. Although experts were unable to collect DNA samples from the suspect to identify the killer, they noted that the buttons on the air freshener cans had been secured with pieces of tape. After a thorough examination, the police discovered tiny traces of DNA on one of the tapes, hoping to gather clues about the mysterious killer. They entered this information into a database, but unfortunately, there were no matches. This suggests that the killer likely does not have a criminal record. However, this process was still valuable, as the system would automatically notify them if a matching DNA sample was ever added to the database. Despite this setback with the DNA, the case took a new turn soon after. Less than a day after Gianni's body was found, on January 18th, another incident occurred that initially appeared unrelated. During the investigation of the triple murder, police officers uncovered important clues. About an hour's drive from San Diego, security officers in San Clemente stopped a man at a checkpoint. He appeared nervous and suspicious during the inspection of his car, which revealed a large cache of weapons in the trunk. This included an AR-15 assault rifle, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, a .45 caliber pistol, and a .22 caliber pistol equipped with a rifled barrel and a homemade silencer. The man, heavily armed, was identified as Carlo Mercado, who was 29 years old at the time of his arrest. The police database indicated that Carlo legally owned 2 firearms. He did not have any previous convictions, and he was not listed as a potential threat in law enforcement records. As a result, he was released immediately, and his guns were confiscated. However, officers later discovered he also had an illegal pistol of that caliber. Given the presence of a homemade silencer, this illegal pistol might have been the weapon used in the triple murder. The police spent 4 months collecting evidence and preparing charges while waiting for the investigation to conclude. Special agents took charge of examining the confiscated weapons, focusing on the illegal distribution of firearms. Carlo had already admitted guilt for the illegal use of weapons after police offered him a plea deal. This deal was essential for them to formally request DNA samples from the Carlo. Once he agreed, the samples were collected and checked against the police database. This led to a match with DNA taken from the Scotch tape found in Gianni's car, which had previously been uploaded to the database. A ballistic examination of Carlo's pistol confirmed that it was the weapon used to shoot all 3 young victims. To further establish his connection to the crime, police analyzed geolocation data from Carlo's mobile phone. This analysis showed that he was near the shopping center at the time of the shooting. His motorcycle had broken down, which made it difficult for the police to find him initially, as he did not appear in most of the security camera footage. However, some footage did capture the motorcycle he used to get to the parking lot, where he was seen standing next to it. When Carlo spotted Gianni's car while he was waiting for her Alona, Carlo saw it as a perfect chance to steal a vehicle. He attempted to threaten Gianni into handing over the car keys, but Gianni fought back. Gianni was unaware of Carlo's dangerous obsession with weapons. He fancied himself a killer and had long fantasized about using a gun. The police later discovered evidence of this obsession during their investigation. Carlo frequently searched the internet for information about weapons, often focusing on gun-related murders, including mass school shootings. His bizarre fantasies prompted him to act. He approached Gianni's car and, in one swift motion, pulled out a .22 caliber pistol. He shot Gianni at close range, then climbed into the car and pushed him into the passenger seat. Excited by the act of acting out his violent fantasy, he drove around the parking lot in Gianni's car before leaving the scene of the crime. Carlo drove to the nearest gas station, as confirmed by the geolocation on his phone. He then decided to go back to get his motorbike, which he had left in a parking lot. On the way back, he crashed into a car carrying Salvatore and Alona. They recognized it as Gianni's car, and Ilona was excited to see her lover's car. She signaled Salvatore to come closer, but this turned out to be a grave mistake. When she realized that the driver was not her boyfriend, it was too late. Ilona panicked and tried to call emergency services, but was unable to finish the call because a bullet had hit her car. Carlo shot Ilona and Salvatore, the brother of the first victim. After killing them, he drove to a gas station and filled up Gianni's car, while the owner was still inside, having bled to death from a gunshot wound. The next morning, Carlo began looking into a murder that had occurred on Christmas Eve. Police later discovered Carlo's fingerprints on the gas cap of Gianni's car. Their efforts to collect and analyze evidence paid off. As a result, in April 2014, Carlo Mercado was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder. Initially, Carlo maintained his innocence. He denied using a weapon against the victims, arguing that he did not know them and had no involvement in the murders. However, the prosecution continued to analyze the evidence, building a case that would ensure the criminal would be imprisoned for life. In June 2014, the trial began, with the prosecution arguing that the attack stemmed from a desire to steal Gianni's car. The prosecution claimed that Gianni had gone to the mall to meet Ilona and was waiting for her in the parking lot. While there, Gianni confronted Carlo, who had also come to the mall. In a fit of rage, Carlo used an unregistered pistol equipped with a silencer. After firing the shots, he fled in Gianni's car. Security cameras recorded the incident and Carlo realized that the police would be looking for the car. To avoid arrest, he changed the car's original license plate to a fake one, filled it with gas, and then returned to the mall to retrieve his motorcycle. Carlo returned to retrieve the motorcycle because he believed it might attract the attention of the police. At that time, Ilona and Salvatore saw Gianni's car while they were trying to find out what happened to Ilona's boyfriend. Instead of running away, Carlo chose to eliminate all witnesses. He used a pistol with a silencer to kill Ilona and Salvatore. The prosecutor's office believed that Carlo saw himself as a professional killer who could escape justice after killing 3 young people. This mindset persisted until the next trial, but just before that date in late July 2016, Carlo admitted his guilt and revealed many details about the crime. He admitted to using air freshener to cover up the smell of decomposing corpses in the trunk of his car. He even tried to sell the car a few weeks after the murders. However, after 3 weeks, the smell became too strong to ignore, so he abandoned the car outside the city. Carlo Mercado was eventually sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. During the trial, Carlo showed no remorse. He remained calm, appearing indifferent to the proceedings. Carlo did not seek forgiveness from the victims' families. Surprisingly, he chose to waive his right to appeal, seemingly as a way of admitting his guilt for the murder of innocent young people. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Diana Duva. Diana Duva was born in 1988 in Moldova. When she was 13, she moved to the United States to join her mother, who had immigrated earlier, married an American, and helped Diana relocate. They settled in Vera Beach, a resort town in sunny Florida, known for its white sandy beaches and warm Atlantic waters. At first, Diana didn't speak any English, but then she quickly enrolled in a local school. She learned the language swiftly. Within just 2 months, she was speaking freely, and after a few years, her accent became very similar to other native speakers. Diana developed a good relationship with her stepfather, Will, who became like a second father to her. She also made friends easily, as she was sociable and approachable. After graduating, Diana was faced with the problem of choosing her future goals. Knowing she wanted to dedicate her life to helping others, she enrolled in a nursing program at college. In 2011, She earned her nursing degree and secured a job at the oncology department of the Sebastian River Medical Center. Here she is highly appreciated by everyone, and her dedicated care has received many compliments from patients. In 2012, Diana met 30-year-old Michael Jones at a local bar. Initially, they were just friends, but their relationship soon became romantic. Friends and family began to question whether their feelings for each other were genuine or if it was merely infatuation. Michael showed interest in Diana, while Diana simply accepted his flirtation without much enthusiasm. Although he worked in asset management at a bank and had graduated from a University of Miami law school, but Michael lacked a sense of security. He is always polite, neatly dressed, and comes from a good family. This makes him an ideal choice to build a family and live together. Because of this, a couple of months after they met, Diana moved into his apartment at his request. Their relationship started off warm and seemingly happy. They spent almost all their time together. However, this closeness eventually led to issues. Diana's friends noticed that she sometimes appeared restless in their company. It seemed as though she was trying to hide from Michael, avoiding letting him see her with her friends or even her car. Although Diana's friends sensed that something was wrong, but she did not share any details about her relationship, leading them to suspect that Michael may be limiting her communication with friends. Before the tragic incident, Diana had a disagreement with her boyfriend, Michael. On April 30, 2014, a neighbor called 911 after hearing them argue for about an hour. Michael was shouting loudly, but there were no signs of physical violence. Concerned that the situation could escalate, the neighbor requested police intervention. When officers arrived, Michael answered the door and explained that the noise was due to rough sex that Diana wanted to try. Diana, visibly upset in her pajamas, stood quietly with her eyes downcast and tears on her face, which the police noticed. She didn't speak up in front of Michael and insisted to the officers that everything was fine. However, before concluding their conversation, she asked the police to wait, gathered her belongings, said goodbye to Michael, and left with them to the station. Later, Diana confided in a friend that Michael had not only yelled at her that night but had attempted to control her for hours. When his efforts failed, he grabbed her by the throat and began to strangle her. Terrified, she feared for her life. Thankfully, the neighbor called the police when realized the situation was dangerous. At the police station, 26-year-old Diana chose not to report Michael's mistreatment behavior to the police. She felt that her relationship with Michael was over and believed she shouldn't worry about it. Although the police persuade Diana to write a statement in her defense, but she refuses because she doesn't want to ruin Michael's life. Diana decided to move to live with her mother to distance herself from him. However, 32-year-old Michael continued to stalk her, sending texts and insisting on meetings as if nothing was wrong. On Thursday, June 19, 2014, Diana was out with friends but left to meet Michael. Her friends last saw her when she left a bar with him at 1:30 a.m. on June 20th. At 1:45 a.m., she texted her mother, Lena Andrews, to say she wouldn't be coming home. That was the last anyone heard from her. After that, she stopped communicating with her family and friends. Although Diana had previously had a strained relationship with Michael, witnesses said that they seemed to be enjoying each other's company that day and showed no signs of conflict. It appeared they had reconciled, but after her disappearance, some people recalled that she sometimes seemed upset when talking to him. Diana spoke to her mother, Lena, every day, so when her mother didn't hear from her and her calls went unanswered, her mother immediately grew concerned. This worry led her to imagine worst-case scenarios. She reached out to Diana's friends, but they didn't know her whereabouts either. When Diana still hadn't returned by the evening of June 20th, her mother contacted the police to express her concerns. The officers took Lena's statement and began an investigation. On June 21st, the police attempted to locate Diana by tracking her phone, but it was disconnected and useless. Their next step was to visit her ex-boyfriend Michael, who was believed to be the last person with Diana before she went missing. However, no one answered the door when the police arrived. He was not home, and all the witnesses, Diana's friends who were at the bar with her that night, were questioned simultaneously. But this led to conflicting stories, because they developed several different theories about what happened that evening. On the same day, the police obtained a warrant to search the apartment of Diana's boyfriend, Michael, but first, they needed to return to the station to complete the necessary paperwork. When the officers returned, they found Diana's mother and stepfather waiting in a car near the apartment complex. Lena Andrews, Diana's mother, was distraught. She was crying and desperate to get into the apartment to find her daughter. As time passed without any contact from her mother's anxiety grew. Lena was convinced that Michael was involved in Diana's disappearance. The police asked her when she last heard from her daughter. Lena revealed that at around 1:45 a.m., she received a message from Diana, which said she wouldn't be coming home. This message was written in Russian, the language they usually use to communicate, and it was significant because Michael did not speak Russian and could not have sent it. After Diana went missing, her mother, Lena, called Michael. He tried to reassure her that Diana was with him and that she was safe. However, when Lena asked to speak to Diana directly, Michael made excuses, claiming she was asleep and that he was not at home. His words sounded fake, and Lena didn't trust him. She insisted that Diana call her back as soon as Michael returned, as she was very worried. Instead, Michael stopped answering calls altogether. Lena began to suspect that Michael was involved in Diana's disappearance and might have harmed her. Desperate for help, she reached out to the police, who assured her they would do everything they could to find her daughter, Diana. The detectives received photographs taken by a friend Diana's on the night before she went missing. These images showed clear strangulation marks on her neck. These injuries occurred following an argument that a neighbor overheard. The friend had tried repeatedly to convince Diana to report Michael to the police, but she refused, asking her friend to help her collect her belongings as she believed the relationship was over. Afterwards, Diana moved in with her parents but chose not to inform them about the incident. Her mother remained unaware of the attack, thinking they had merely had some disagreements, although she did have her suspicions about Michael. Despite this, Michael did not leave Diana alone and began to harass her. He continued sending messages, as if he didn't understand that their relationship was really over. 48 hours after Diana disappeared, the police obtained a search warrant and entered Michael's apartment, hoping to find her or some evidence about her whereabouts. However, they did not locate any of her belongings or any clues. The next step was to search for Michael Jones. Witnesses reported that he showed up at work just 12 hours after Diana stopped communicating. He also withdrew $2,500 in cash from his bank account, claiming he was unwell and needed to leave. For several days, no one could locate Michael. His whereabouts were unknown. It appeared he had gone into hiding, raising suspicions about his involvement in the disappearance of Diana. Detectives began to delve deeper into Michael's background. They discovered that prior to the move to Vero Beach, he had been convicted of stalking his ex-girlfriend under serious circumstances. Investigators reviewed the details of that case. In 2012, when Michael lived near Fort Lauderdale, his ex-girlfriend reported him to the police. She claimed that after breaking up with him, he threatened to end his life. When this manipulation did not succeed, he physically attacked her. Michael used a gun in an attempt to force her to stay. His earlier girlfriends had managed to escape by calling the police. The ex-girlfriend filed a report against Michael, leading to his arrest. He cooperated with the investigation and confessed to his actions, including making threats of murder. Consequently, he received a suspended sentence of 5 years. Then, Michael was in a new relationship with Diana. He was restricted from leaving the Vero Beach area if no his supervisor's permission. However, he vanished, and the police were unable to locate him. He could have been detained for violating the terms of his suspended sentence. The parents of Diana were shocked to learn of Michael's suspended sentence. They had no idea their daughter was involved with a criminal who had a history of attacking and threatening former girlfriends. Meanwhile, detectives concentrated on Michael, believing he had more information than he shared with Diana's mother during their phone call. The police initiated a thorough analysis and tracking of signals from Michael's communications. They also placed Michael's and Diana's cars on a list of vehicles to be located. After reviewing cellular signals, they pinpointed Michael's phone to an area in Fort Pierce, about a 25-minute drive from Vero Beach. Patrols were dispatched to search for the cars of Michael and Diana, focusing on a gold Honda and a black Nissan. By the evening of the same day, they discovered Michael's car parked at the Hampton Inn Hotel near the communication tower. The police learned that Michael had checked into a room just 24 hours after Diana disappeared. Michael tried to keep his identity a secret while staying at a hotel, but he ended up leaving the information when he had to pay for the room at the front desk. The hotel management was told not to disclose that he was staying there for the next 2 nights. He also barred any phone calls to his room and turned off his own phone. When the police arrive, they believe they may find Diana alive, with her kidnapper, Michael, in the hotel room. After receiving the room key from the front desk, the police entered the room. Michael was shocked when he saw the police, and immediately claimed he had no idea where Diana was. The detective pressed him to share any information he had, but he continued to deny everything. Since they couldn't gather any information, Michael was detained for violating his probation. Still, the detective had no leads on Diana's whereabouts or her car. It was discovered that during Michael's time on the run, he had been using a disposable phone, making it nearly impossible to trace his communications. The investigation continued as detectives identified the location where the disposable phone was purchased, the Wall store. They requested and reviewed the store's CCTV footage to find Diana or her vehicles. Despite the poor quality, they spotted a car similar to Diana's vehicle in the footage, which was recorded shortly before she was reported missing. In the video, Michael exits the car, makes a purchase at the store, and then drives away, while Diana is not seen. Although this did not provide any leads, it led the police to a more detailed analysis of phone calls, revealing that Michael occasionally used his main phone. He turned it on briefly before switching it off again. One of the phone's pings was detected near Melbourne, about an hour's drive from where Michael was hiding. Investigators alerted the local police to check this area. The Melbourne police joined the search for the Diana's missing car, and their efforts paid off. Just 30 minutes later, they found Diana's car in the parking lot of a Florida Publix shopping center. Investigators quickly arrived to the scene after learning about the discovery. In June 2014, just 3 days after Diana went missing, state police found her body in the trunk of her own car. This led to the case being reclassified from a disappearance to a murder investigation. The autopsy revealed that Diana had been strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to her head, indicating she had been violently attacked before her death. It was widely believed that Michael was responsible for bringing her to that location. CCTV footage captured him driving her car, and his phone records showed he was in the area at the time. When investigators examined Michael's call history, they found that the only call he made while in the vicinity was to order a taxi. Around 8 a.m., he called for a ride and was picked up from a nearby parking lot. The taxi driver was found and interrogation. He recognized Michael from a photo. The driver recalled that Michael was wearing a red hoodie and sat in the front passenger seat, where they chatted briefly. According to the driver, Michael claimed he had come with a friend, but after they had a fight, he left alone. 2 days after Diana's body was discovered. Police gathered enough evidence to charge Michael Jones with the first-degree murder of Diana. However, Michael maintained his innocence, necessitating further investigation to establish his guilt. As the police investigated his background, they discovered that he did not fit the usual profile of a criminal. He was educated, intelligent, and held a respected job at a bank, making him a valued member of the community. Many people were skeptical about his capacity for murder. He frequently participated in local charity events and was an advocate for an organization working against domestic violence, where he had a positive reputation. Friends and co-workers praised him, claiming he was one of the most honest and trustworthy individuals they knew. They expressed that they trusted him as much as their own family members. The management at the banks where Michael worked regarded him as one of their best employees and a key team member. They received numerous letters of appreciation acknowledging his contributions. Since he started at the bank, Michael brought in many partners, leading to multimillion-dollar deals. While he enjoyed a good reputation in the bank, it was overshadowed by the fact that he was a convicted criminal serving a suspended sentence. Michael was a master manipulator, able to deceive not only ordinary people but also the bank's management, which had a security service that meticulously monitored employees. They were completely unaware of Michael's criminal past. As the police began to investigate him, they discovered that his history was filled with inconsistencies. Different people shared conflicting stories about him. Some claimed he was a former baseball player, others said he was an adopted child from a wealthy family, while some believed he had inherited a fortune and was raised in a family connected to a former U.S. president. They also believed that Michael lived in a luxurious penthouse and drove a Porsche, even though he himself had driven a Honda for 10 years. Although the investigation identified Michael's previous girlfriends and detectives spoke to them, police now saw a clear pattern in his behavior. At first, he seemed charming, like a prince on a white horse, winning the girls over with his best qualities. The girls were thrilled to be with someone so promising. However, over time, he revealed a darker side. He became controlling and jealous, dictating how they should interact with others and monitoring their communications. He manipulated multiple girlfriends simultaneously, maintaining these relationships for extended periods. Michael was not only a skilled manipulator but also a cruel individual and a pathological liar. Most of the girls were fortunate. They avoided persecution and found ways to break up with Michael without suffering serious consequences. Michael lied about being poor when he entered college, but in reality, he came from a wealthy family. His lies about his background grew more serious after his parents cut off their financial support. He attempted to manipulate them, but it was unsuccessful. While studying, he falsely claimed he was fighting cancer to gain sympathy from his classmates. But he couldn't provide any medical evidence to support his claims. The prosecution faced a difficult choice: pursue the death penalty or settle for life in prison. They did not consult Diana's mother about this decision. Choosing the death penalty was particularly risky. If even one juror disagreed, it could put the whole case in danger. Additionally, such cases can take years to resolve. However, Diana's mother was adamant that Michael should face the death penalty. Refusing to back down, the prosecutor stated his intention to seek capital punishment. In November 2019, Michael's trial began. The prosecution described his relationship with Diana as toxic, describing it as a cruel attempt at control that lasted around 6 months. The climax of this abuse was an attack on Diana. The prosecution presented clear evidence of Michael's aggressive behavior, including photos taken by a friend, which showed marks on Diana's neck. While the prosecution could not confirm the exact conversation between Diana and Michael at the bar that night, Diana's friend reported that she planned to end her relationship with Michael, but wanted to do so in a friendly manner to preserve their friendship. Afterward, Diana planned a short trip to visit a friend in a nearby city. She mentioned her plans to Michael, which likely angered him. Tragically, this led to her demise. Diana's body exhibited multiple injuries and bruises, indicating she had suffered severe abuse at Michael's hands. The prosecution argued that Michael took Diana to his home and assaulted her violently. He understood that if she managed to escape, she would probably go to the police, leading to a long prison sentence for him. So, he couldn't let her go. Michael killed Diana by strangling her, leaving characteristic handprints on her neck. Afterward, he placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove her out of town. He then took a taxi and hid in a hotel. Fortunately, he left behind clues that led to his capture and the resolution of the case. The forensic expert admitted that they couldn't determine the time of death accurately because the body had decomposed significantly in the heat, complicating the investigation. However, upon closer inspection of his apartment, small but distinct traces of blood were found in the garage. These traces were located where the sliding door meets the ground, suggesting that he loaded her body into the car at his home. The defense argued that the prosecution failed to clearly establish what happened in Michael's house, claiming that it was unreasonable to consider the murder premeditated and that the incident should be classified as an accident. The lawyer also presented strong arguments for a reduced sentence, such as the attitudes of neighbors, friends, and acquaintances towards Michael, along with Michael's good reputation at work. The court heard testimonies within a week. Afterward, the jury went to deliberate and reached a decision surprisingly quickly, in just 45 minutes. They unanimously found Michael Jones guilty of first-degree murder. However, the jury did not have a collective agreement on the verdict. Diana's mother, crying, confronted Michael and asked how he could kill someone he professed to love. Even so, Michael showed no remorse or emotion during the trial. Even as the court prepared to announce the verdict, he remained emotionless. The prosecution was greatly disappointed when Michael Jones received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Klondike Bishimbayev. Klondike Bishimbayev was born on April 11, 1980, in Gildorda, which was part of the Kazakh SSR. In 2000, Klondike began his career as a bank manager. He completed a short internship at the Ministry of Economy, then spent several years in senior roles at major companies before returning to the ministry. In 2016, he became the Minister of Economy, making him one of the youngest high-ranking officials in Kazakhstan. However, just 8 months later, he was dismissed due to a major scandal and was imprisoned for accepting large bribes. He received a 10-year sentence but was released on parole after 1 year. He later apologized to Nursultan Nazarbayev, the then president, who granted him a pardon. Klondike's personal life includes 2 official marriages before he met the future victim. His first marriage was to Agarim Rova in 1999, while he was still a student. They had a son, Alexander Valikin, in 2000, but their marriage ended in 2004. In 2006, while working as an advisor to the Minister of Economy and Budget Planning in Kazakhstan, he married Nazim Karmanbabagaleva. They were married for 14 years and had 3 children together. However, in 2020, Nazim initiated their divorce. Sultanat Nuknova was born on May 15, 1992, in Pavlodar, a city in northern Kazakhstan. As a schoolgirl, Sultanat developed a strong interest in astrology. She thoroughly studied related literature and created horoscopes and natal charts for her friends and classmates. To her surprise, many of her predictions turned out to be quite accurate. Eventually, she decided to turn her hobby into a profession, and success followed quickly. Sultanat promoted her astrological services on social media, offering personal and online consultations. She provided both short-term and long-term forecasts, assisted people in achieving their goals, choosing careers, and finding spiritual growth. Additionally, she offered advice on love, assessed compatibility, and helped individuals navigate their relationships. Sultanat only worked with women and girls. She quickly became financially independent by earning good money from her passion, something she knew well and enjoyed. Her social media following grew significantly, and many people sought her services, leading to consultations being booked months ahead. She was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. In the spring of 2022, Kwandike Bishimbayev, who was a dedicated fan, came across Sultanat's page on a popular social media platform. He was captivated by the young beauty and decided to reach out to her by signing up for an astrological consultation. However, she turned him down, explaining that she only offered services to women. This rejection only increased Kwandike's interest in her. He persistently sought her attention by showering her with compliments and trying to win her over, insisting that she was the only one who could help him and that he exclusively trusted her expertise. Although Sultanat appreciated his flattery, she was determined to avoid meeting him, finding his behavior distasteful. He repeatedly offered her an online consultation, but she was firm in his refusal. For months, Kwandike persistently tried to ask Sultanat out on a date. During this time, he learned almost everything about her: where she lived, who she interacted with, where she went, and what her interests were. Despite this, Sultanat continued to reject his advances but told her friends that she had an ardent admirer. Eventually, Sultanat agreed to meet him. Kwandike made every effort to impress her. He was polite and courteous. However, that first meeting was only the beginning. In a candid discussion with her brother, Sultanat expressed that the man was not her type and that a relationship between them was unlikely. Initially, neither Sultanat nor her family was worried about the Kwandike's behavior. She believed she could keep him at a distance, and her family and friends trusted that she could make her own choices. However, a month later, the situation began to shift. He found a way to get closer to Sultanat by reaching out to the eldest member of her family. He expressed a desire to speak with her grandmother and seek her blessing. This gesture affected Sultanat, but she still declined to pursue a relationship with him. Unexpectedly, in the fall of 2022, Sultanat visited her parents in Pavlodar and shared that she didn't expect any significant changes in her personal life. She confessed to her brother that she was troubled by the 12-year age gap with Kwandike and felt no romantic attraction towards him. Additionally, her astrological calculations indicated they weren't compatible. However, less than a month after that visit, her brother stumbled upon a post on social media where Sultanat announced that Kwandike had officially proposed to her and she had happily accepted. This news shocked the entire family, as it was completely unexpected. Even her friends were taken aback, as she had recently told them that Kwandike was not the right match for her and she believed nothing serious would come of it. In December 2022, just a few months after they met, they held an extravagant wedding, featuring an expensive banquet at one of the most popular venues in Astana. It's important to note that their marriage was not officially registered. They only participated in a special marriage ceremony at a mosque and did not register their union with the authorities, so they were considered civil partners. During this time, Sultanat's feelings towards her partner changed significantly. She frequently shared with her friends how intelligent, educated, well-read, and articulate he was, and how he could easily engage in conversations on any topic. She also firmly denied any wrongdoing on his part in a high-profile corruption case that led to his brief imprisonment, insisting that he had been framed and was serving time for someone else's crime. On the surface, the couple seemed happy. Kwandike showered his wife with gifts, and she affectionately referred to him as her golden husband, expressing that she had no regrets about marrying him. Their friends admired them and actually celebrated her marriage. However, this happiness was short-lived. The first warning sign appeared after their wedding when the couple moved into the home of the husband's parents. The parents lived on the first floor, while the newlyweds stayed on the second floor. Almira, the mother, tried to shower Sultanat with love and support, often giving her gifts and helping her from household chores. However, she was unable to protect Sultanat from her husband's behavior. Sultanat occasionally visited her parents with her husband, but she chose not to invite them to her home because it upset Klondike and led to arguments. Initially, her family was unaware of this, but less than a month after her wedding, her brother, Ibek, visited her on New Year's Eve and witnessed an uncomfortable situation. A large festive table was set up, but the celebration was meant to be a small family gathering. When her brother and his wife arrived with gifts for everyone, Sultanat felt embarrassed because she had no gift to offer in return. To resolve the awkwardness, she decided to give the woman a bottle of expensive perfume that her husband had bought for her the day before, which she hadn't opened yet. However, her actions not only upset her husband, they made him extremely angry. He yelled that she had no right to give away what he had given her and started insulting her. The guests, sensing the escalating tension, quickly decided to leave the house. The parents, attempting to defend their daughter-in-law, were abruptly silenced. To make matters worse, in his fury, Klondike overturned the table filled with food and drinks, ruining the New Year's Eve celebration. Ibek was taken aback by what he witnessed and was unsure how to respond. The following day, during a phone call, Sultanat revealed that her husband's behavior had drastically changed since their wedding. She didn't understand why and was hopeful that the situation would improve over time. Ibek advised her to come home and end the relationship, but Sultanat firmly rejected his advice. 2 months after the incident, Sultanat unexpectedly sent her brother some selfies. In these pictures, her face was covered with severe bruises, and she asked him not to ask her any questions. Concerned, her brother attempted to reach her by phone, but she didn't answer. He then called her husband, who agreed to meet for a discussion. During their meeting, Klondike, Sultanat's husband, told him to stay out of their affairs and refused to explain the bruises. He also couldn't tell him where she was, which left her brother feeling very uneasy. Fortunately, Sultanat was discovered in her parents' country apartment, where she had a set of keys. Despite her loved one's pleas, she decided to return to her husband, claiming that she loved him and was willing to do anything to save their marriage. For a while, her husband treated her well, showering her with gifts and promising to change for her. They even took a trip together to a popular resort in the Maldives, appearing very happy. However, later, the vacation photos revealing visible bruises on Sultanat's body and fingerprints on her wrists, suggesting she had been roughly grabbed. Ibek stated that neither he nor his parents had heard his sister mention any issues in her marriage since then, although her behavior and appearance changes were telling. She had lost a significant amount of weight and became more reserved. She started wearing outfits to cover up the bruises and cuts on her body. Additionally, she stopped taking appointments and ceased offering online consultations. On social media, she only posted photos with her husband, expressing her luck and love for him. As it later turned out, her husband prohibited her from pursuing her passion, leaving her without any income and fully dependent on him. He monitored all her actions and interactions. She needed his permission to meet friends or have lunch in a cafe without him. He even checked her phone calls and messages. Sultanat was only seen in public with Klondike, who acted like a devoted and caring husband. Most of her friends were unaware of the distress she faced at home and even envied what seemed to be a perfect family. Once, Sultanat recently shared with a close friend that her husband controlled every aspect of her life. He forbade her from working, prohibited her from communicating with her parents without his permission, and was unreasonably jealous, often accusing her of infidelity. He also physically abused her. When her friend heard this, she was shocked and urged the woman, Sultanat, to leave her husband right away. However, Sultanat reacted by yelling and insisted that she wasn't seeking advice, she simply wanted to talk about her situation. Sultanat, seeking to save their marriage, sought help from a family psychologist. However, her husband dismissed all the options suggested by his wife and insisted on using his own specialist. During their sessions, this psychologist convinced Sultanat that she was solely responsible for their problems. In a recent conversation with her brother, Sultanat expressed her concerns that her husband had hired the psychologist specifically to belittle and demoralize her once again. In the summer of 2023, Sultanat tried to leave her husband and planned to stay at her parents' house for a while. However, just a week later, Klondike came to take her back, asking her to give their marriage another chance. He suggested they move into his house, and Sultanat thought that a new environment might help their relationship. She also believed that having a child together would improve her husband's treatment of her, but she was unable to get pregnant. At the last family dinner in October, Sultanat attempted to leave her controlling husband and quickly sought a rented apartment with her brother's help. However, just 10 days later, she not only returned to him but also underwent the marriage ceremony again at the mosque, a fact she shared with her family. On November 5th, she invited her parents, brother, and a few close friends to a restaurant owned by Klondike's brother, Bakitsan Bazanov, to celebrate their reunion. During the ceremony, her husband acted very gallantly and courteously, showing his affection for her and vowing to protect her, while always keeping an affectionate eye on her. That evening, everyone was convinced of his genuine feelings and words, but tragedy was just days away. On November 9th of the same year, Sultanat's brother returned home from work and was going about his day when he received a phone call. A relative, sounding frightened, asked him if the rumors circulating on social media were true. Confused, he asked her to explain what was going on. She then sent him a link to a news article stating that the former Minister of Economy had killed his young wife. Ibek was disheartened by the news but found it hard to believe what he read. Just the day before, he had spoken to his younger sister, who had once again mentioned that she planned to leave her husband. She had asked him if she could stay over at his place, and he told her she was welcome anytime, even pointing out where the spare keys were. However, neither that evening nor the following day did she come home, and her phone had been silent since then. The man hurried to his sister's house, but found it empty. Her husband was also not picking up his phone, and the situation was becoming urgent. They quickly decided to head to the family restaurant, where Sultanat had last reached out to them, to seek answers. While Ibek was on the way, he received a call from his parents, who had seen the news and wanted to understand what was going on. However, he couldn't provide them with any information and only assured them he would find out more. Many police officers were present in the restaurant. When they learned that Sultanat's relative had arrived, they immediately offered their condolences, explaining that Sultanat had died before the medics could assist her. Ibek was in disbelief. He thought it must be a terrible mistake, but the news was unfortunately true. Witnesses indicated that by the time Ibek arrived, Klondike had already been arrested and taken to the station as the main suspect. Klondike firmly denied any wrongdoing, describing the incident as a tragic accident and insisting that he had been trying to help his wife. Additionally, his brother and who was the restaurant owner, Bakitsan Bazanov, were also taken into custody on suspicion of involvement. In the beginning, the suspect's lawyer claimed that his client was completely innocent and pointed out the lack of evidence against him. However, it was later revealed that the ex-minister and his brother had destroyed crucial evidence by deleting video recordings from cameras inside and outside the restaurant. Fortunately, experts were able to recover the footage, which shocked everyone who saw it. The investigation into this complex case lasted nearly 4 months, during which Klondike continued to assert his innocence. He acted as though he believed he could escape punishment, even as he faced serious charges of murder with extreme cruelty. Forensic experts who examined the deceased noted that they had never seen such extensive and severe injuries before. Some of these injuries occurred 6 to 8 hours before her death, suggesting she was beaten for a long time, leaving no uninjured areas on her face and body. Kwandik's lawyers attempted to downplay his responsibility. He himself claimed that most of his wife's injuries were self-inflicted due to her being drunk, stating that she frequently fell and hit her head on the bathroom tiles and furniture. According to Kwandik's testimony, on the evening of November 8, 2023, the couple attended a concert by singer Dima Bilan with friends. During the concert, they had a heated argument, but the friends couldn't clearly explain what it was about. The loud music made it hard for them to notice that Kwandik and Sultanat was fighting. They initially thought the couple were just having a discussion. Suddenly, the couple left the concert hall without saying a word. They then went to the Bao restaurant, where they continued their argument privately in a VIP cabin. The camera footage reveals that Kwandik took several bottles of alcohol from the bar and went to a booth with his wife. While they shared a bottle of wine and talked about their relationship, she expressed her dissatisfaction and announced her intention to leave him. This infuriated Kwandik. He screamed at her, threatened and slapped her. Following this, she called her brother and informed him that she would be staying at his house for the night because she had decided to leave her husband. Around midnight, as she was leaving for her brother's house, her husband confronted her and continued the argument. The surveillance footage reveals that the couple argued for about 15 minutes. Eventually, the man persuaded his spouse to re-enter the building for a short time. Inside, they continued to fight in the vestibule before isolating themselves in a stall, where there were no cameras, leaving us to speculate about what happened there. Footage from the hallway camera captures Sultanat attempting to escape from her husband. She acted calmly and maintained her distance while he repeatedly tried to close the gap, grabbing her hands, shaking his head, and pushing her against the wall. Sultanat, unable to escape, tried to hide from her abusive husband by locking herself in the bathroom. However, he began to kick the door violently, causing damage as he attempted to break in. When he finally got in, he struck her multiple times in the face. He then said that she was dependent on him, claiming that he had met all her needs. The husband alleged that in a fit of anger, Sultanat stripped off her clothes and jewelry, flushing them down the toilet to show that she did not want anything from him. Alternatively, some accounts suggest that he forced her to undress to humiliate her. After the gold jewelry fell down the drain, Kwandik became enraged and struck his wife multiple times in the face. He then pushed her forcefully, causing her to fall and hit the toilet. During the trial, he argued that his wife was drunk and had fallen several times while undressing, hitting her head on the tiles and plumbing. He claimed that they had planned to go home after leaving the restaurant, but he felt unable to drive because he had consumed too much alcohol. He also didn't want to call a cab because he was embarrassed by his wife's drunken state, as she was wearing a coat over her underwear. They returned to the booth in the same stall. Shortly after, the couple exited, but Sultanat paused to look at her injured face in the mirror. Her husband then aggressively pushed her towards the exit, leading to a violent confrontation. He brutally attacked her with his hands and feet and pulled her by her hair. Around 7 o'clock in the morning, he dragged her back to the VIP cabin. There, he ultimately caused her death, although during the trial, he claimed he hadn't harmed her, arguing that she had fallen and injured herself on the floor and furniture. He said that Sultanat lay on the sofa and fainted. He noticed a bruise on her face and felt worried, but instead of calling an ambulance, he contacted a fortune teller to see if everything was okay with his wife. The fortune teller assured him that she was just drunk and needed rest, which made Kwandik feel more at ease and decide not to interfere. He mentioned hearing snoring, which he later realized was actually a death rattle. Around noon, he realized his wife was no longer breathing and urgently called his brother, Bakitson, for help. They decided to close the restaurant and asked the staff to leave. After that, they erased footage from all the CCTV cameras. During the trial, Bakitson stated he trusted his younger brother's claim that Sultanat was just drunk and asleep, and agreed to delete the recordings, which he believed showed her behaving inappropriately and bringing shame to herself and her family. Bakitson only called an ambulance later in the evening, by which time her body was already cold and rigor mortis had set in. He claimed he attempted to resuscitate her, but it was too late. Sultanat had already passed away. The investigation also focused on Nazim, Kwandik's wife and mother of his 3 children. A few years prior, when the ex-minister was arrested for corruption, she defended him publicly. However, shortly after his release, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and stating that she had outgrown their marriage. However, after her ex-husband was publicly accused of brutally murdering his new wife, Nazim gave an honest interview. She acknowledged that he was indeed capable of such a crime. Nazim shared that they had been married for 14 years, but after the birth of their second child in 2011, her husband became aggressive, selfish, and narcissistic. He began to think the world should revolve around him, with his opinions as the most important. Furthermore, he constantly cheated on her, without any effort to hide it. Kwandike was arrested in 2017, and it was only then that Nazim discovered the full extent of his infidelity by accessing his personal data on his phone. She learned that he had multiple mistresses, who frequently changed. After he was released by the Pardon Commission, he became increasingly violent and aggressive. A month later, a minor disagreement escalated between the couple, and in a fit of rage, he smashed the toilet lid and threw it at Nazim. Nazim successfully avoided confrontation, but in that moment, she understood that her marriage had come to an end. She believed that Kwandike had suppressed his darker tendencies for a long time, knowing she would not accept such behavior. However, he did not hold back when it came to humiliating and insulting his mistresses, who were unable to resist him. Regarding Sultanat, Nazim thinks that Kwandike deliberately selected his target and tested her patience and willingness to endure. Once he realized she would stay quiet and wouldn't leave, he revealed his true nature as a refined sadist. The trial started in March 2024, and it quickly became apparent that it would be challenging. The family of Sultanat demanded that the trial be as transparent as possible, allowing journalists to attend and the public to observe the proceedings. They were concerned that Kwandike might leverage his wealth and extensive connections to pressure witnesses and judges in an effort to evade a severe punishment. He requested a jury trial, which was approved. A total of 12 jurors were chosen, 10 main jurors and 2 alternates, along with the presiding judge. Kwandike had previously been convicted of a serious crime but was out on parole. A new serious offense could have led to a life sentence. In a jury trial, he would only face the death penalty if every juror, along with the judge, unanimously agreed. The chances of this happening were very low, so he held on to that hope. During the trial, he repeatedly claimed he was not guilty of premeditated murder with particular cruelty, arguing that the incident was accidental and resulted from a tragic mix of circumstances. He stated that his spouse provoked him by insulting him, yelling, and becoming physically aggressive. However, numerous recovered video recordings from surveillance cameras presented evidence that contradicted the initial claims. The authorities initially attempted to charge him with domestic violence, a crime in Kazakhstan that, due to lenient laws, does not carry severe penalties. This decision sparked significant criticism, particularly from the family of Sultanat. Her mother, in court, expressed her heartbreak over being unable to say goodbye to her daughter due to the severity of the injuries, while fearing that her son-in-law might face only a minor punishment, which shattered her faith in justice. In response to the public outrage, a new law was enacted in April 2024 to impose stricter penalties for domestic violence in Kazakhstan. Kwandike pressured his brother, who was accused of being an accomplice, to provide false testimony to help him avoid consequences for his actions. However, Bakitson requested the court to protect him from Kwandike, and this request was granted. Throughout the hearings, Klondike made numerous attempts to disparage his late wife, labeling her as inadequate, unbalanced, and an alcoholic who frequently cheated on him and provoked his anger. He tried to persuade the court that he acted out of passion that night and only struck his wife a couple of times, claiming those injuries were not fatal. He argued that all her other injuries were self-inflicted due to her frequent intoxication. He claimed that the bruises on her neck were caused by attempts to revive her, insisting that he was trying to help. But his brother, Bakitson, stated that Klondike prevented him from calling for medical assistance for Sultanat and was more interested in deleting footage from the cameras. Klondike then instructed him to take her cell phone back to their home to make it look like she was moving around the city, tricking her brother, Ibek, into believing she had returned to the apartment, even though he was monitoring her location. During the 9th hearing, he and his lawyer asked for the judge to step down, claiming they was biased. Their request was denied, and the judge continued overseeing the trial until a verdict was reached. On May 13, 2024, he was found guilty of serious charges, including inflicting bodily harm, torture, and murder of his common-law wife. He received a 20-year sentence for murder and an additional 7 years for battery and torture. In total, he was sentenced to 24 years in prison. His brother, Bakitson Bazanov, was also convicted, received a 4-year prison sentence for providing shelter. The court considered his lack of prior legal issues, his genuine remorse, and his full cooperation with the investigation. However, the family of the victim, Sultanat, expressed their dissatisfaction with the ruling. Her father had hoped for a life sentence for his former son-in-law, claiming that any lesser sentence would be unjust. Meanwhile, Sultanat's brother pointed out that a 24-year prison term for the 44-year-old defendant effectively amounted to a life sentence. The tragic story of Klondike Bishimbayev and Sultanat Nuknova serves as a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic abuse and the complexities of relationships marred by control and violence. Despite Sultanat's initial dreams of independence and success, her life took a harrowing turn, ultimately leading to a heartbreaking end that shocked her loved ones and exposed the darker aspects of her husband's character. This narrative underscores the critical need for awareness, support systems, and interventions to protect individuals from the perilous cycle of abuse, highlighting the importance of listening to and believing victims before it's too late. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lori Vallow. Chad Daybell was born on August 11, 1968, in Provo, Utah, a small town 18 miles south of Salt Lake City. He grew up in a humble family and was a quiet, shy child. In school, Chad was an average student with no standout talents or athletic skills, and he often felt self-conscious about his weight. After graduating from high school, Chad enrolled at Brigham Young University, BYU, in Utah, overcoming several challenges to do so. He a bachelor's degree in journalism in 1992. While in college, he married a woman named Tammy. The couple quickly had 5 children, 3 sons, Seth, Mark, and G, and 2 daughters, Emma and Leah. After completing his education, Chad worked as an editor for a local newspaper. To support his family through financial difficulties, he also took on jobs as a night watchman at a church and as a gravedigger at a nearby cemetery. Since Tammy focused on homemaking and raising their children, the family struggled to make ends meet. Chad then decided to use his journalism education to write a religious-themed book. He published his first work in 1999, which was a collection of religious stories and fantasy elements. To his surprise, the book became quite popular and earned him a big income. As a result, Chad quit his jobs at the cemetery and the newspaper to pursue writing full-time. About a year and a half later, he released another book titled 1 Foot in the Grave. This book was a science work in which he shared his experiences as a gravedigger and explored themes of death, the afterlife, and soul reincarnation. In 2004, Chad established his own publishing company, Spring Creek, to self-publish his writings. His works focused on views about the approaching end of the world and Judgment Day. Over time, some people noted that Chad's religious beliefs seemed to grow more intense. He published numerous fiction and popular science books that included religious themes. Additionally, he began hosting podcasts and creating audio and video sermons to help people prepare for the second coming of Christ. Chad referred to himself as an apocalyptic writer and claimed to have visions of the future, hear voices from the deceased, and receive unique prophecies. Lori Vallow was born on June 26, 1973, in Loma Linda, California. Growing up in a large family, she had 2 older brothers and 3 sisters. Her parents, Denise and Barry Cox, worked hard to support their children. From a young age, Lori was especially close to her older brother Alex, who was protective of her. During her school years, Lori was recognized as a true beauty and had many admirers. She was a charismatic blonde with a slender figure and an engaging smile, enjoying the spotlight and embodying a spirited, adventurous personality. In the spring of 1992, 18-year-old Lori married Nelson Yanes, with whom she had started dating during her senior year. However, they soon realized they had rushed into marriage and were unprepared for family life, resulting in their divorce less than a year later. They did not have any children together. In the fall of 1995, Lori remarried, this time to William Leah. A year later, they welcomed a son named Colby, but their marriage ended in 1998, just 2 years after his birth. In early 2001, Lori married Joseph Anthony Ryan, who adopted her son from her previous marriage, Colby. A year later, they had a daughter named Tylee, but their marriage ended in 2005. After the divorce, an incident occurred when Joseph came to visit the children. Lori's brother, Alex, attacked him, stating in court that he was protecting his sister's honor because Joseph had insulted her. Consequently, Alex was fined and received a short prison sentence. Lori married Charles shortly after divorcing her third husband, Joseph. They got married in February 2006, and Charles is 17 years older than Lori. Despite the age difference, it did not affect their relationship. Charles had been married before and had 2 teenage sons, Zachary and Nicholas, from those relationships. Lori and Charles lived in Nevada with Lori's children from her previous marriages, while Charles's sons would visit on holidays and weekends. Charles owned a small business that provided a stable income for his family. Lori, who had not pursued further education, did not work, but Charles never criticized her for it. In 2014, the couple officially adopted a young boy named Joshua Jackson, also known as JJ Vallow, who was Charles's grandnephew. JJ had autism and needed expensive therapy, which his relatives could afford. Towards the end of 2014, the family Charles decided to move to the Hawaiian Islands, specifically to Kauai. At that time, Zachary, Nicholas, and Colby were already adults living on their own, so the Charles family moved as a group of 4: Lori, Charles, Tylee, and JJ. The family Charles moved to a well-known tourist destination and decided to open a beach bar that focused on fresh juices, smoothies, refreshing drinks, and non-alcoholic cocktails. Despite their hard work and Charles's background in business, but the bar quickly failed due to strong competition. During this period, Lori an interest in religious literature, particularly a book series called Standing in Holy Places by Chad Daybell. She became so fascinated by the writer's Chad ideas that she became almost obsessed, buying all his books and reading them every day. In 2016, the family Charles had to leave Hawaii and move back to the mainland, settling in Arizona. While Charles worked diligently to support the family, his wife, Lori, became more engrossed in her religious beliefs, becoming disconnected from reality. In October 2018, Lori and her close friend Melanie went to an event titled Preparing People for the Second Coming of Christ, which was hosted by Chad in a nearby town. Excited to meet Chad, whom she admired greatly, Lori sat in the front row, completely focused on him, and Chad also noticed her attractive appearance. After the event, the writer Chad and religious speaker decided to personally exchange with his readers, while Lori, as expected, remained behind. She listened intently and asked if she could touch his hand. After she did, Chad looked into her eyes and revealed that they had been husband and wife in 7 previous lives. Lori and Chad exchanged contact information and began talking every day. A few weeks later, while Charles, Lori's husband, was away in Nevada for work, she invited Chad to host a gathering at her home. On that day, around 12 people gathered at the Lori house to discuss God, Judgment Day, and the Second Coming. Lori and Chad decided to work together to prepare people for the impending judgment. They started hosting podcasts about this event, delivering sermons, and writing articles. As time went on, Lori became more disconnected from reality in her family, but Charles did not notice this change right away. He believed it was just a temporary obsession that would eventually fade. By the time he recognized the severity of the situation, it was too late. Lori began to speak about dark spirits and zombies, claiming to her family and friends that she had been chosen by God for a special mission. This mission included the task of defeating the spirits of darkness, demons, and all evil. Charles's efforts to help his wife return to reality were unsuccessful, and she increasingly viewed him as a dark force that needed to be eliminated. By the end of 2018, Charles and Lori's marriage was nearing its end. In February 2019, while Charles was away on a week-long business trip, Lori replaced all the locks in their home. When he returned, Charles found himself locked out, noticed that both his car and the family truck were gone, and realized that $35,000 had been withdrawn from his bank account. Charles shouted for his wife and attempted to enter their home. In a chaotic manner, Lori rushed outside, shouting threats and insults. She yelled that his true self was gone and that a demon had taken over his body. Without hesitation, Charles went to the police station to report Lori for stealing from him and blocking his access to their home and children. He was worried that Lori had threatened to harm him, so he requested a protective order to keep Lori away from him. That evening, Charles's statements were documented as part of standard procedure. He mentioned his wife's intense religious beliefs, her expectation of an imminent apocalypse, and the tendency to categorize people into 2 groups, either light or demonic beings. Although the officers mocked him while asking questions, they still issued a protective order. The following day, Charles filed for divorce and changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Lori to his mother and sister. Charles's lawyer explained that he was worried about the well-being of JJ, who needed special care. He believed that his mother and sister would responsibly manage the insurance money and care for JJ if anything happened to him. A few months later, Charles made the critical error of rescind the restraining order against Lori. Charles wanted to reconcile with Lori and save their marriage. So he started visiting her home. He missed the children and hoped for the family to come back together. On July 11, 2019, when he arrived to see his children, he was shot twice in the chest and died. Lori's brother, Alex, called emergency services to report the shooting and admitted to pulling the trigger. He claimed he acted in self-defense, stating that Charles attacked him first with a baseball bat. In response, he pulled out a pistol and fired 2 shots at Charles. The incident was witnessed by the homeowner and the children, and their accounts of what happened were mostly similar. The court determined that the incident was an accidental killing that occurred in self-defense. Although Charles had the potential to cause serious harm with a bat due to his history as a former baseball player, Alex's head injury was minor. On the same day Charles's body was taken to the morgue, Lori hosted a party at their home, complete with music, many guests, and a disco by the pool, right where her husband had been shot and where blood was still visible. She did not organize a funeral or inform anyone about what happened. A week after Charles died, his son, mother, sister and other family members discovered the incident when they learned that his body had not yet been claimed at the morgue. After Charles's death, a series of mysterious disappearances and deaths occurred. Lori sold their home in Arizona and moved with her children to Rexburg, Idaho, near Chad and Tammy, who lived in the area. Lori's brother, Alex, also moved in with them to the same housing complex. Lori's 16-year-old daughter, Tylee, did not attend school and was rarely seen outside. This led many neighbors to be unaware of Tylee's existence. At the same time, Lori described her daughter as a dark entity during a phone call with a friend. On September 8, 2019, Tylee, Lori, and Alex visited Yellowstone Park, where were joined by Chad. Although several photographs from this trip feature Tylee, she was never seen alive again after that day. On September 24, Lori withdrew JJ's records from school, stating he would be homeschooled. Following this, JJ, 7-year-old boy, was also not seen again. Less than a month later, on October 19, Chad's 49-year-old wife Tammy died unexpectedly. Chad claimed she had a cold and cough. She likely passed away from respiratory failure during her sleep, showing no signs of foul play. Her death was classified as natural. Interestingly, Chad refused to allow an autopsy to confirm the cause of death, a choice that raised no suspicions. After Tammy unexpectedly passed away, Chad received nearly $500,000 from her insurance policy. 2 weeks later, Chad and Lori went to Hawaii and got married in a ceremony by the beach. This surprised Chad's children, people who are still grieving the loss of their mothers and found it hard to understand their father's decision. When they returned to Arizona, Chad and Lori lived together and misled others by stating that Lori's children were staying with relatives or claiming she had no children at all. They also rented a small storage unit nearby and moved all the children's belongings there, as if they had never existed in their home. On December 12, 2019, Alex passed away unexpectedly at home. Although it seemed he died from a heart attack, so his death was classified as natural. As time went on, many people began to ask Lori about her children's whereabouts. While she was able to deceive neighbors and friends, it was more challenging to maintain her lies in front of family members. Colby, Lori's eldest son, had limited contact with his mother after he moved away. He made a real effort to contact his younger sister, Tylee. At first, Lori answered the calls using her daughter's phone, pretending to be Tylee. However, Colby quickly realized that something was wrong. Meanwhile, Charles's family wanted to see JJ. They requested to take him for holidays or weekends, or just wanted to chat with him on the phone, but Lori always refused or came up with strange excuses. Eventually, JJ's grandmother reported him missing to the police. Shortly after, Colby also went to the police to help find his younger sister, Tylee. When police officers visited Lori's home and requested to speak with her children, she falsely claimed they were with relatives. This turned out to be untrue, so the police returned to her house. They gave Lori a week to bring the children to the station, but instead, she and Chad escaped to Hawaii. On February 20, 2020, Lori was arrested on Kauai and brought back to Arizona. A search of her and Chad's home was conducted, but there were no signs of the children or evidence that they had ever been there. Chad, her husband, who had been defending her by claiming she had no children, soon became a suspect himself. On June 9, police found human remains buried in their backyard. Forensic analysis confirmed that the remains belonged to Tylee and her younger brother, JJ. Chad was quickly arrested for hiding evidence and being an accomplice. Authorities then chose to exhume the bodies of Tammy and Alex to determine how they died. In both cases, they discovered traces of chemicals that could cause heart failure, indicating that these individuals did not die of natural causes. The trial of Lori and Chad began in January 2021. They were charged with conspiring to commit serious crimes, committing fraud through grand theft, and engaging in insurance fraud. Additionally, the circumstances surrounding Charles's death were changed from self-defense to premeditated murder. During the trial, witnesses testified that Lori described her children as dark entities and claimed she could save their souls. There were concerns that the deaths of 16-year-old Tylee and 7-year-old JJ may have involved ritualistic practices. Notably, Tylee's body was found partially burned, and weeks before that, Chad sent Lori a People review email in which he rated Tyle as a level 2 dark soul. Due to the serious charges against Lori and Chad, there was a possibility of capital punishment. However, in May 2021, Lori's defense team successfully argued that she was incompetent, which paused the trial. Meanwhile, all 5 of Chad's adult children maintained their father's innocence, stating that he was framed by Lori and Alex. In 2022, after receiving treatment in a psychiatric facility, Lori was found competent to stand trial and face her charges. In March 2023, the judge decided that Lori Vallow would not receive the death penalty, a ruling that the prosecution is currently trying to appeal. Later, in July 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, on May 30, 2023, Chad Daybell was convicted of first-degree murder of his first wife, Tammy, and Lori's 2 children, Joshua, JJ, Vallow and Tylee, as well as conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. Chad Daybell then was sentenced to death on June 1, 2024. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nathan and Crystal Maddox. In Colmasneil, a small town in Tyler County, Texas, with a population of just 563 people. Nathan Maddox and Kristen Westfall's relationship progressed quickly. They lived on nearby streets and shared milestones like their first love and first kiss. Despite their strong bond, Kristen's parents disapproved and tried to end the relationship. Torn between her love and her parents, Kristen initially chose her family. However, everything changed when she discovered she was pregnant. Faced with this reality, her parents decided to accept the situation and permitted the couple to marry, as single motherhood was socially unacceptable. Nathan and Kristen got married in Texas. Shortly after, they bought a house and welcomed their first child, a daughter named Madison. However, family life wasn't as idyllic as in the movies. Nathan had to work hard to support them. Owning and maintaining a house was expensive. So he took a job in Montana, away from home. As a young husband and father, he tried to visit Kristen and Madison as often as possible. He regularly sent money home, believing that he had a happy family waiting for him. He loved Kristen and Madison and thought they were the perfect little family. One day, when he returned home from Montana, he immediately noticed the house was empty. Most of the belongings were gone, and there was a note on the kitchen table. In a few brief lines, Kristen informed that she was leaving. Her reason seemed odd. She claimed she didn't know where her husband was, who he was with, or when he would return. She wrote that she was unhappy, but this was untrue because Kristen knew Nathan was in Montana for work. He called regularly to check on her and their daughter, and he sent them money regularly. The most painful part was that she took Madison with her, and Nathan was now forbidden from seeing his daughter. Kristen did something very unkind. She went to the police station and provided false information to gain full custody of her daughter, claiming that the child's father was not supportive or interested. Nathan was aware that his ex-wife and daughter had moved back to her parents' home. He made several attempts to visit his daughter Madison, but the Westfall family was firm in their refusal. They were happy to have gotten rid of an unwanted son-in-law. As time went by, Nathan moved back to his hometown to be closer to his daughter. He continued his efforts to see her and understood that he needed to work with a lawyer to gain official custody and arrange legal visitations. During this challenging time, he met with Crystal again. They had known each other since childhood, having attended school together. As teenagers, their lives took different paths. Crystal moved to the big city, dreaming of graduating from university. However, in her final year, she got married. Instead of pursuing a successful career, she enjoyed a happy family life and had 4 children. Unfortunately, over time, her marriage deteriorated, leading to a divorce. In 2011, Crystal returned to her hometown with her children. Crystal and Nathan, longtime friends, reunited at a crucial moment for both. Nathan was captivated by Crystal's children and admired how she interacted with them. Her boundless energy and optimism lit up everything around her, like a fairy. Nathan and Crystal got married in 2013. Nathan worked at the Lack and Industries warehouse, while Crystal started a small clothing business, opening a children's clothing boutique under her own name and selling handmade jewelry. The business was doing very well, which allowed them to afford a good lawyer to seek visitation rights or custody of Nathan's daughter from his first marriage. Madison was delighted with her father's new wife and her new siblings, and she felt completely happy in her father's home. This made Lita and Paula Westfall, Kristen's parents, very resentful and worried about losing their only granddaughter. In 2012, Kristen Westfall requested full custody of her daughter in court. With her parents' support, the custody battle dragged on for 2 long years. The Westfall family was hoping to gain full custody quickly, but Crystal's arrival in Nathan's life changed the whole situation. A complete family, a home, and a good job made a strong case in court, and Nathan was granted visitation rights with his daughter. In October 2013, the judge allowed Nathan and Crystal to have supervised visits with Madison. On January 18, 2014, Nathan and Crystal arrived at Mount Carmel Church for the Sunday service. After the service, they wanted to take a walk with Madison, who was 6 years old. They left the church a little ahead of the rest of the congregation to go get some gifts they had prepared for Madison from their car. A few minutes later, 3 loud gunshots rang out. Nathan and Crystal were tragically killed by gunshots to the head, shocking their small town with the brutal murder of them. Initially, the killings seemed senseless, but later investigations revealed a motive. The police conducted a thorough investigation at the scene, where they found a .30 caliber rifle and matching shell casings. The autopsy of Nathan showed he was also shot in the thigh with a 20-gauge shotgun. This discovery led investigators to believe there were 2 shooters, since it's unlikely that one person could have managed both weapons simultaneously. The investigators carried out a set of interviews with witnesses to collect information about the Maddox family and to understand what occurred. They spoke with church members, friends, and relatives of the deceased family. However, the most surprising aspect was the response from Nathan's ex-wife's family. Both Kristen and her parents, along with other witnesses, were summoned to give testimony at the police station. The attitude of this family really shocked the investigators. The Westfalls played up the tragedy so much that it seemed like they were hiding their happiness about the deaths. Paul Westfall was so stunned that he had a fit. He couldn't believe the news of Nathan's death and had to call emergency services. A grown man who spent years trying to cut Nathan out of his daughter's life was so devastated he suffered a seizure. Kristen was the first person interviewed, and her interview was somewhat unsettling. She was the only family member who remained calm and composed, even though she and Nathan had been together for a long time and had a child. Kristen shared some strange details about him, focusing only on the negative aspects of her ex-husband. She claimed to know who killed him, mentioning that Nathan was involved with dangerous motorcycle gangs in Montana. One day, one of the alleged gang members showed up at Nathan's mother's house and threatened to kill him. Although the story was partly true, the threat didn't materialize because a motorcyclist inadvertently broke his bike. It was also found out that the existence of the gang had been exaggerated to throw off the investigation. Moreover, as an alibi, Kristen stated that on the day of the crime she was at the supermarket with her dad, Paul, just a few miles from the church, and then they both went home. Surveillance footage at 10:57 a.m. confirmed they were at the supermarket. Paul Westfall told exactly the same story. However, because Paul was a hunter and owned a firearm, they tested his hands for gunshot residue, but the results were negative. Still, his reaction to Nathan's death, whom he openly hated, seemed very strange to the investigators, leaving them slightly doubtful about his sincerity. Interviews with Nathan's loved ones over a short period revealed that he was in a custody battle with his ex-wife Kristen Westfall and her family over their daughter. After a long and bitter court dispute, Nathan was close to gaining custody, which the Westfall family strongly opposed. This intense conflict could have led to retaliation, but the police lacked concrete evidence to arrest anyone from the Westfall family. The family consisted of 4 people, and 2 of them could be the shooters. Investigators were still not convinced by their story and were trying to determine which family member fired the shots that killed 2 people. Regardless of whether it was a hired assassin, the investigators took a different approach and decided to focus on the main figure of the controversy, little Madison. After all, her safety was at risk, and she was still with a family that could be dangerous to her. Police officers and Child Protective Services, CPS, arrived to take the girl from the Westfalls' home, but were met with strong protests and anger. Due to the actions of the older Westfall family members, a search of the house was conducted. During this search, the police made a shocking discovery. A gun was stored on a shelf in a room where it could be easily reached. The search concluded with the discovery of illegal drugs throughout the house. In 2013, Kristen Westfall was charged and arrested for possessing a controlled substance. She faced repeated arrests, suggesting she couldn't be a fit mother to Madison. When Kristen went to jail in early 2013, her parents were given temporary custody of her daughter and did not permit Nathan to visit Madison during this period. Kristen defied Child Protective Services orders and continued living in the same house and sharing a bed with her young daughter. Even in 2014, despite court injunctions, she remained with her family and saw her daughter daily, disregarding the court's directive to move out. In March 2014, Child Protective Services got involved in the custody case of Madison, less than 2 months after the tragic murder in front of the church. Authorities arrested 4 people, Kristen Westfall, 29, her younger brother Cameron, and their parents, Paul and Letha Westfall. There was no direct evidence of their guilt in murder. The interrogations didn't yield the expected results, so the police resorted to deceptive tactics to pressure the most vulnerable member of the Westfall family, 18-year-old Cameron. If his guilt was proven, he was told that all his family members would face life imprisonment and the direct perpetrators of the murder would receive the death penalty. Cameron was young and kind-hearted. He was really scared and quickly agreed to cooperate with the investigation, revealing all the details of what had happened. The crime against Nathan and Crystal turned out to be meticulously planned by the Westfall family to completely exclude Nathan from the role of a father. The Westfalls were worried and carefully planned a scheme to keep Nathan out of Madison's life. Nathan wanted to take care of his daughter on his own, but the Westfalls were unwilling to let him see her, much less grant him permanent custody. The Westfalls were really upset that their ex-son-in-law had gotten his life together and was living well. So, when the judge allowed him multiple visits, it became clear that he might win the case. This led Kristen to come up with a plan to get rid of him once and for all. Initially, Kristen tried to hire someone to kill her ex-husband, but when that didn't work out, she decided to do it herself with her father. On Sunday afternoon, the family usually attended church, and January 18th was no different. Letha Westfall and little Madison drove to the service at the scheduled time. Afterward, Letha had to hand Madison over to her father. Meanwhile, Kristen and Paul went to a distant store and pretended to be customers to appear on CCTV cameras, trying to establish a solid alibi, but they miscalculated the timing. Each family member had a specific role to fulfill. Throughout the entire period, they communicated via text messages, updating each other on Nathan and Crystal's movements. Letha, who attended the service, informed Paul when Nathan and Crystal were about to leave the church. She also the one who called 911 immediately after the murder. Cameron played a key role in hiding the evidence. He disposed of the gun used by his sister and father to shoot the newlyweds in the head near a remote church. He drove to a lake and threw away a bag of weapons. Cameron later decided to cooperate with the authorities and revealed that Kristen initially came up with the plan, which the family followed. He also showed investigators the spot where he had thrown away the murder weapons. Divers eventually recovered these items, confirming Cameron's statement. The police arrested Kristen, Cameron, and their parents, Paul and Letha Westfall, charging them with organized crime. Kristen and Paul fired the shots, while Cameron and Letha willingly assisted them. Since Letha was at the church during the incident, she clearly did not shoot Nathan and Crystal Maddox. However, phone records revealed that she informed her daughter and spouse of the couple's location as they left the church. Although Kristen and Paul pulled the trigger, Letha and her son Cameron were knowingly involved in the crime. The trial was noisy and prolonged. Each Westfall family member was tried individually. Paul Westfall pretended to have seizures and was deemed mentally unfit, staying in a state psychiatric hospital for evaluation. In May 2014, a judge ruled Paul incompetent, but this decision was reversed 4 months later. Facing with threat the death penalty for the murders of Nathan and Crystal Maddox, Paul and Letha accepted a plea deal with the district attorney's office to avoid execution. Paul accepted a plea deal from the prosecution, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole after pleading guilty to the charges. Letha also accepted a plea deal and admitted to participating in organized criminal activity, avoiding a trial. She is currently imprisoned at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville and will be eligible for parole in 2044. At the time of her sentencing, Letha Westfall was 54 years old, which means she may spend the rest of her life in prison. Kristen is the third person from the Westfall family to be tried in this case. During the trial, she maintained her innocence against all charges. She claimed that her entire family was unstable, and she was the only one honest about it. When her family members, Letha, Paul, and Cameron, testified against her in court, she couldn't confront them directly. Kristen Westfall's final trial and sentencing started in August 2016. The reason for killing Nathan and Crystal was related to the custody of Madison. Kristen strongly opposed Nathan having unrestricted access to see Madison. She couldn't bear the thought of him being happy. Kristen wanted to manage the communication between her daughter and Nathan herself. Through their daughter, she aimed to control everything he did and felt. The trial lasted more than a week. Ultimately, with overwhelming evidence against her, the jury took 8 hours to find her guilty of capital murder. In a Brazos County courtroom, attorneys and the judge reviewed final motions for the woman. Kristen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, nearly 9 months before her father pleaded guilty and received the same sentence in May 2017. Kristen Westfall is currently serving her sentence at the William Hobby Women's Prison in Falls County, Texas. Paul, Letha, and Kristen Westfall were charged with 2 counts of murder. However, the youngest family member, Cameron, was only charged with 2 counts of tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. Cameron pleaded guilty to 2 counts of third-degree evidence tampering. The judge postponed his sentencing based on Cameron's agreement to testify against his family. He could face up to 10 years in prison for each charge. He was reportedly not involved in the shooting, and his mother was not involved either, as she was at the church when the crime happened. However, phone records indicate that she texted her husband and daughter while the Maddoxes were getting ready to go home. Cameron is currently imprisoned at the Huntsville Correctional Facility in Huntsville, Texas, and is expected to be released in 2025. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of the Raumen family. Jean-Claude Raumen was born on February 11, 1954, in Lille, France, and grew up in Clairvaux in the Jura region. He completed his baccalaureate in 1971. He began his studies at the University of Lyon but lasted only 1 semester before dropping out. He then went to medical school and eventually married a woman named Florence Crave. Florence Crave was born on March 6, 1956, and studied at the University of Lyon to become a doctor. There, she met Jean-Claude Raumen, a distant relative of her family. Initially, Jean-Claude did not attract Florence's attention, and they did not know each other very well, nor did they spend much time together. However, over time, through mutual friends and study sessions, they began to spend more time together. Jean-Claude immediately fell in love with Florence and tried to win her over. However, Florence saw him as just an ordinary guy, nothing special, and not very articulate. She had envisioned herself marrying a typical doctor, smart, attractive, and charming. After failing her second exam, she switched from medicine to pharmacy. Together with Jean-Claude, they continued to support each other in their studies and exams until they graduated in the next decade. In 1980, Florence and Jean-Claude Raumen got married. 6 years later, they had their first child, Caroline. 2 years after Caroline was born, their son, Antoine, was born. Florence lived a normal life as a wife and mother. She worked in local pharmacies to support her family, while her husband, Jean-Claude, worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, a short distance from their home in France. After Christmas 1992, Florence went out and traveled around France for a few days. During that time, their children, Caroline and Antoine, were at school, while Jean-Claude was working in Geneva. Jean-Claude Raumen kept his work life private, sharing very little information with his family and friends. Florence believed that her husband was involved in important and respected medical research. He maintained a clear boundary between his work and personal life, to the point that Florence could never call his office phone, as Jean-Claude insisted on not being disturbed during work hours. If Florence needed to contact him urgently, she could send him a text message, and he would call her back as soon as possible. Friends often asked about Jean-Claude's role at the WHO, wanting to know exactly what he did there. Florence usually dodged the question by giggling and admitting that she was not sure either. Sometimes, she joked that maybe one day she would find out her husband was a secret agent. Every year at Christmas, the WHO holds an office Christmas tree decoration event, allowing employees to bring their families to participate. In Christmas 1992, Florence learned about the event, but her husband never mentioned it to her. Florence felt anxious and insecure about his situation. From an acquaintance revealing that her husband was not listed in the WHO directory to discovering that her family was not mentioned at his workplace after more than a decade of service, these things may have affected Florence's mental state. The extent to which these revelations impacted Florence remains unclear, as it is not known whether she confronted her husband about the matter. According to Florence's brother, who went on holiday with the family, Florence appeared to fall into a deep depression during those days. During this time, family conversations became only speculative. As the new year of 1993 approached, Florence and Jean-Claude Roman went shopping together a few days later, and Florence insisted that Jean-Claude buy a new suit, which she eventually convinced him to do. On that same day, after leaving from his wife, Jean-Claude went to a pharmacy and placed an order for January 9th. On the evening of January 5th, he withdrew 2,000 francs from two different ATMs. Before heading to a gun store, Jean-Claude gave 500 francs to a homeless person he met. After leaving the store, he took several items with him, including a pepper spray canister, a box of bullets, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun gun. The night passed peacefully upon his return home. On January 11th, at 4 a.m., an emergency call was made to the fire department, reporting that a fire was raging in the house. In the early hours of the morning, garbage collectors discovered the house on fire and quickly alerted the fire brigade. As the firefighters arrived and began extinguishing the flames, they noticed movement in an upstairs bedroom window, suggesting that someone inside needed help. Paramedics were called, and Jean-Claude Roman, who had been trapped in his residence, was rescued. When he was brought out, he appeared to be in a state of shock and unresponsive to the paramedics. Jean-Claude was then taken to the hospital, where he eventually fell into a coma. Within a short time, the fire was extinguished, allowing the fire brigade to enter. Jean-Claude's family friend Dr. Luc Ladmiral was called to the scene and witnessed the horrific sight as stretchers carried the charred bodies of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence away from the scene. When a fire causes death in a family, the police conduct an investigation to clarify the details of the incident. This process aims to provide closure to the grieving families and eliminate the possibility of any criminal activity. Consequently, after the tragic fire, law enforcement agencies launched an investigation due to the significant loss suffered by the family of a prominent doctor. During the autopsy of Florence's body, the medical team discovered evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. This raised suspicion and curiosity, especially after it was determined that Florence's death was caused by blunt force trauma rather than by the fire. The autopsy results of the children revealed another heart-wrenching truth. Contrary to initial assumptions, Caroline and Antoine did not die in the fire, rather, they had died earlier from gunshot wounds. This suggests that events occurred before the house burned down. Following the suspicious circumstances surrounding the deaths of Florence and her children, law enforcement launched an investigation. However, with Jean-Claude Roman in a coma and unable to provide any information, investigators faced challenges pursuing alternative leads, leaving the Rome home as the crime scene. Officials contacted the victim's family, acquaintances, and neighbors to gather more information about the events surrounding the case. Dr. Luc Ladmiral, who witnessed the victims being taken away from the scene, was also contacted as part of the investigation. Amidst the uncertainty, Luc struggles to make sense of the situation. When questioned by investigators about family enemies, Luc is unable to identify anyone. However, he is summoned for questioning a few days later. Luc finds himself under police investigation regarding his family's connections and recent events that may have caused the fire. Despite extensive questioning, the conclusion remains the same: the family has a good reputation, and no significant incidents occurred prior to the tragedy. Then attention turns to Jean-Claude, who reveals a shocking piece of information: he has never been employed by the World Health Organization, nor has he ever lectured at the University of Dijon. In fact, he is not a qualified doctor, let alone employed in any medical capacity. Luc is initially skeptical, but as he recalls their shared school experience, his suspicions grow. This leads to a startling realization. He tells the authorities about an incident that occurred during his sophomore year when he noticed Jean-Claude absent from an exam. The change in Jean-Claude's usual behavior worries Luc. When he visits Jean-Claude at home, he observes signs of poor health, including clammy skin, a low complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude claims he is being treated for lymphoma, a manageable form of cancer, but the condition is exacerbated by stress related to the exam. At Jean-Claude's request, Luc pledges to keep this information confidential, especially from Florence. Investigators determine that Luc has no further details. They therefore wait for the results of the forensic examination of the burnt house, hoping to gather more information for the investigation. Investigators note unusual details in the house. They find that all the doors are locked from the inside, indicating that no one had illegally entered. Initially, the hypothesis of an accidental fire is put forward, but this changes when the condition of the bodies is revealed. The new findings point to a more sinister scenario, necessitating an interview with Jean-Claude. While he remains unconscious for weeks, the authorities focus on him as the main suspect, initiating a full investigation. Although Jean-Claude does not have a medical degree, his long studies at the university raise suspicions. When the educational institution is contacted, they confirm that he had been studying for 12 years. Although he successfully completed the first-year exam, he failed the second-year exam. Taking advantage of the lack of admission restrictions, Jean-Claude repeatedly re-enrolled in the second year throughout his studies. Despite devoting much time and effort to studying, attending lectures, and reviewing medical texts, he still cannot pass the second exam, which is puzzling. It is possible that staying up late and missing the exam was a significant factor. He was given the opportunity to retake the exam several months later, but he did not take it. As investigators continue to probe the deaths of Florence and the children, they face another horrifying discovery. Jean-Claude's uncle, wanting to break the bad news to Jean-Claude's parents, goes to their home only to be met with an unusual silence. Upon entering, he discovers the bodies of Jean-Claude's parents, both victims of gunshot wounds. The investigation confirms that Jean-Claude's parents had been shot with the same type of gun used to kill Antoine and Caroline. Their deaths occur close together, suggesting that the events are related. After the tragedies are made public, the mystery deepens. The police receive a call from a woman who does not want to reveal her identity or any personal information and is hesitant to participate in the investigation. However, she provides one crucial piece of information: she has become romantically involved with Jean-Claude after meeting him in Paris. She also claims that he is not a researcher at the World Health Organization. He had deceived her into believing that he was an influential expert. The woman was tricked into believing that Jean-Claude was actively involved in and funding important research projects. He also described banks in Geneva as very profitable. Using his POS he deceived her into investing money in a Swiss bank with an 18% interest rate, which turned out to be a trap. Employing persuasive techniques, Jean-Claude convinced his girlfriend to invest her money. She was initially hesitant, but they eventually reached an agreement. She would provide him with 990,000 francs to invest, hoping to receive a return in 3 months. As the payment deadline approached in early January, the woman reminded Jean-Claude of their agreement, stressing that she needed the money to support herself and her family. After some negotiation, they arranged to meet for dinner. He invited her to dinner with a prominent political figure, intending to generate interest and hopefully recover her investment. On the agreed date, he picked her up in Paris to begin the trip they had been anticipating. As night fell, Jean-Claude and the woman got lost. Suddenly, he stopped the car and attacked her inside. He used tear gas, stun guns, and cables against her. However, she fought fiercely for her life and managed to escape from the car. He chased her but agreed to stop when he begged for mercy. It seemed he realized his plan had failed and pleaded for forgiveness. The excuse he gave the woman was one that had become familiar to investigators. He claimed that his lymphoma was flaring up, causing him to behave erratically and unlike himself. The woman agreed to keep quiet about the incident in exchange for Jean-Claude bringing her home safely. Investigators started to piece together a better understanding of him. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a con man. The question that haunted the detectives was he also a killer? After waking from his coma, Jean-Claude was quickly approached by investigators to discuss their remaining suspicions. They expected him to confess, but he chose to remain silent. He sat in his hospital bed, staring blankly into space, unresponsive when asked about the events of January 9th, the origin of the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, the serious injuries his wife suffered, and the discovery of his parents' deaths. He was subjected to repeated interrogations, but despite relentless questioning, he refused to reveal anything. It was only when investigators informed him that they knew the truth, that he was not a doctor and was unemployed, that he changed. What prompted him to finally break his silence remains unclear, but he eventually began to talk. According to him, on the night of January 9th, Jean-Claude and Florence were having a typical evening at home. After putting their children to bed, they retired to their bedroom. According to his recollection, the entire situation came to a sudden end when he recalled the horrific scene of finding his wife sprawled on the bed, surrounded by blood and holding a blood-stained rolling pin. It is unclear what happened. Perhaps there was an argument, but Jean-Claude went to bed with his wife and woke up the next morning to prepare breakfast for the children. Caroline and Antoine sat on the couch, watching cartoons that their father had chosen. He served each of them a bowl of cereal before joining them to watch TV. When the children asked about their mother's absence, he told them that she was not feeling well and needed more rest. That morning, Jean-Claude noticed that Caroline was feeling ill and was concerned about her health. He guided Caroline to the bedroom upstairs. Caroline then lay face down on the bed with a pillow over her head, but the reason for this was not explained. Jean-Claude was unable to provide a clear explanation to investigators regarding the chain of events. However, he speculated that the incident may have been related to a game he had been playing with his daughter. He then used a .22 caliber rifle fitted with a silencer to fatally shoot his 7-year-old daughter in the back of the head. Antoine similarly met a tragic end. After the incident, his memory became hazy. The evidence presented at trial showed that he left home, bought a newspaper, and went about his daily activities, appearing normal to people. He then returned home and watched television. Although Jean-Claude denied these details at trial, one event was certain: he received an invitation from his parents to have lunch on the day of the incident. He accepted the invitation, left his quiet abode to drive to his parents' house, and joined them for lunch. He then tricked his father into going upstairs under the pretext of checking a faulty boiler. Despite his father's old age, he still attempted to perform the requested inspection but was unexpectedly shot in the back by his own son. When he returned to his mother's place, he did not make up any excuses this time. His mother became the only victim, shot by him when he faced her. The motive behind these actions remains unclear. Before leaving, he also killed the family dog. When asked about this at trial, it was the only time he showed remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears and revealed that the dog had been very much loved by his children, bringing back memories of Caroline. At that point, Jean-Claude decided to return home and commit suicide. However, his plan did not go as intended. He had previously had a mistress who had provided him with 990,000 francs with the promise of an investment scheme, which was how Jean-Claude supported himself. He told many people, including his relatives and Florence's family, stories of the profits from these investments. People who trusted he entrusted him with managing their finances. This allowed he to gradually accumulate a large sum of money. He then transferred the money to private bank accounts in Geneva, avoiding the scrutiny of tax authorities and others. He had carefully managed the family finances, ensuring that his wife, Florence, had no knowledge of his fraudulent activities. However, the time had come to face the consequences of what he had done. As expected, people began to demand that he return our money along with the promised profits. Unfortunately, this was an obligation he could not fulfill. All of his income was immediately used to meet current needs, leaving him with virtually no savings, despite having accumulated over 2 million francs over the years. It was time for him to come clean and share the truth with Florence and the others who had entrusted him with their money. He found that he could no longer maintain this lies, and the mounting pressure made him feel trapped with no clear way out. Like many others, he convinced himself that by ending the lives of his loved ones, he would save his family from the consequences of his wrongdoings. He then planned to commit suicide to avoid facing the harsh reality. He believed that he could continue lying forever and never thought that he would be discovered or that he would have to confess. He kept coming up with other lies to maintain the pattern throughout his life. On June 23, 1996, the trial of Jean-Claude began. During the trial, he sat silently, avoiding eye contact and keeping his head down, with police on either side. On July 2, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole for 22 years for the murder of his wife, children, and parents. In 2019, Jean-Claude Roman applied for release from prison to live in a monastery. During his incarceration, he reportedly became a devout Christian, accepted his mistakes, and vowed to spend the rest of his life repenting as punishment. The judge accepted his plea, citing his good behavior as a factor worth considering. However, it is unfortunate that all the victims suffered at the hands of this deceitful, manipulative, and cruel man. As we reflect on this heartbreaking event, we cannot help but feel compassion for those whose lives were taken so suddenly and for the families and friends who suffered their loss. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Wilma Anderson. Wilma Anderson was born to Linda and Marcus Anderson after her parents divorced. Wilma moved in with her older sister Emily. Despite this difficult situation, Wilma's mother remained closely involved in her life. According to her mother Linda, Wilma was an active and ambitious girl who loved to socialize with people. She loved social media, often sharing photos of her life on Facebook, and enjoyed every opportunity to be captured in photos. At the age of 15, Wilma met Tishko Ahmed Shirzad, 20, in Sweden. Wilma's mother was concerned about her daughter dating someone older, but she trusted Wilma's choice and eventually accepted their relationship. Tishko, who is originally from Iraq, moved to Sweden at the age of 8 to live with her father and stepmother. He became a Swedish citizen in 2014 and eventually found a job in the care industry after completing his studies in 2018. Wilma and Tishko's relationship took a significant step forward when they moved in together in Uddevalla, Sweden. At first, things went smoothly, but over time, their relationship changed and became increasingly troubled. Tishko began to become more controlling, which Wilma's mother noticed, a change in her daughter's behavior during the 2 years Wilma lived with Tishko. Wilma often spoke to her sister Emily about the problems she was having with Tishko. On November 14, 2019, Wilma spoke to Emily on the phone when she went to Tishko's apartment to collect her belongings. During the call, Wilma expressed her intention to end her relationship with Tishko, citing his excessive control over her life. She felt suffocated by his behavior, dictating what she wore, where she went, who she saw, and even how she applied her makeup. Feeling suffocated by his domineering and abusive behavior, she had had enough and just wanted it to end. When Tishko returned home from work, Wilma ended the call. Emily then tried to contact Wilma, but she was unable to reach her. The next day, November 15th, Wilma missed a scheduled dentist appointment. 2 days later, on November 17th, Wilma's parents visited the apartment she shared with her boyfriend. After knocking on the door, a moment later, the door slowly opened and they saw Tishko. Linda was worried and asked Tishko where Wilma was. Tishko told them that he and Wilma had broken up and that she had left after packing her things. He claimed that he did not know where she was and did not expect to see her again. Linda and her husband went into the apartment to try to find out more information by talking to Tishko. Tishko told them what had happened that night, saying that he and Wilma had gotten into a big argument when he got home from work at 5:30 p.m., which ended with Wilma leaving him. Wilma's parents were not too concerned about her absence at first, as her relationship with Tishko was often argumentative and unstable. However, Wilma's sister, Emily, became increasingly concerned and turned to Facebook for help. In her post, Emily explained that Wilma had been missing since November 14th and had not contacted her family, which was unusual for her. Emily described Wilma as being 165 centimeters tall with black hair with blonde highlights. She stressed that this disappearance was out of character for Wilma and expressed her deep concern for her sister's safety. The police were involved, taking a report and starting to collect statements from family and friends. Their goal was to reconstruct her recent activities and interactions. They interviewed those who had last seen or spoken to her. Linda and Emily confirmed that they had not had contact with Wilma since November 14th, noting that their attempts to call her had gone unanswered. A search party was organized, combining the efforts of the police with those of her friends and family, using dogs and drone technology to scan inaccessible areas for any traces. When police questioned Tishko, he denied knowing where Wilma was and said he had not heard from her recently. By Sunday, November 17th, 3 days after Wilma went missing, there was still no sign of her. This was especially worrying because Wilma, who posted frequently on social media, had been completely inactive for an unusually long period of time. The situation became more urgent, prompting some 5,000 people to join the search for her. Police continued to question Tishko, seeking more information, but he maintained that he had no knowledge of Wilma's whereabouts. He claimed that after they broke up, she had moved on to someone else. However, there was no evidence to support this, leaving her loved ones confused and worried. At the same time, Wilma's family revealed a heartbreaking story to the police, lamenting how their daughter's life had taken a drastic turn since she became involved with Tishko, creating a bleak contrast to her once vibrant and sociable self. Linda revealed that Tishko had complete control over her, constantly telling her what to do and monitoring her every move. Emily shared some disturbing information that Wilma had told her. It was clear that Tishko had become violent in their relationship. Despite the abuse, Wilma still had strong feelings for Tishko. Tishko's level of control was so extreme that he even attached a GPS tracking device to Wilma's phone, allowing him to know her location at all times. A series of text messages between Wilma and Tishko revealed a disturbing control in their relationship. An exchange from a previous argument showed that Wilma had asked Tishko to contact her when he felt he could trust her. As part of the investigation, police looked into Tishko's alibi for the time. Tishko claimed he had been in the apartment after returning from work at 5 p.m. To verify this, police tracked Tishko's movements using GPS tracking on his phone. Surveillance footage showed Tishko at the supermarket at 2:30 p.m. on the day Wilma went missing. He returned home from work at 5 p.m. Around 6 p.m., neighbors reported a loud and escalating argument between the couple, louder than their usual disagreements. A concerned neighbor decided to check on them but was met with an unsettling silence as they approached the apartment door. The sudden silence was unnerving, and the neighbor, not knowing what to do, returned to their apartment. Police continued to investigate Wilma's disappearance, carefully analyzing Tishko's activities. They expanded their search to his workplace and company vehicle, requesting forensic analysis. The car's GPS showed that he had been traveling from Thursday, the 14th, to Monday, the 18th. The GPS log showed that he visited clients and returned home during his regular work hours on those days. On the day of the dispute, Tishko's phone showed that he left his apartment at 6:30 p.m. Witnesses saw him walking along the highway, alone and dressed all in black. A motorcyclist described Tishko as deep in thought about something. Tishko was stopped by police and taken home. When questioned, Tishko said he had initially wanted to catch a train, but then changed his mind and walked home. Curiously, the police did not file a report after the encounter. On November 19, 2019, while the investigation was still ongoing, police noticed that he had visible scratches on his forearms. After obtaining a search warrant for his apartment, police found several of Wilma's belongings, including a handbag, jacket, shoes, and eyeglasses. Wilma's mother, Linda, said her daughter always carried the bag with her, making the discovery even more suspicious. Police examined the scene with Blue Star, a high-tech version of luminol. The results revealed ominous bloodstains on the walls and floors throughout the apartment, suggesting a violent struggle. As police reconstructed the events, a chilling story began to emerge. Bloodstains stretched from the living room to the bedroom, suggesting something, or someone, had been dragged. Even the bed bore a dark imprint, a haunting shape of a torso highlighted by the bright light of the Blue Star. Police also discovered muscle tissue on a knife and blood splatter on the living room wall. The large amount of blood found at the scene indicated a violent incident, making the possibility of survivors very low. When police searched outside the apartment, they discovered trash bags containing Tishko's bed sheets with blood stains on them. When questioned at the police station, Tishko denied knowing anything about the blood stains and said he would have noticed if there had been more blood in his house. As the search for Wilma continued, more and more people joined in, hoping to find her and provide a glimmer of hope amid the growing tragedy. The apartment where Wilma was last seen became a grim crime scene, but attempts to find her were unsuccessful. On November 28, 2 weeks after Wilma went missing, police brought in sniffer dogs to help search the crime scene. These specially trained dogs can detect the scent of a dead person. When they entered the bedroom, one of the dogs quickly indicated that there was a possibility of a corpse or human remains. The apartment was also filled with a distinct and unpleasant odor. Although the police had searched the bedroom before, they searched thoroughly again, focusing on the area the dogs had marked. They focused on a dresser, which appeared to be just another piece of furniture in the room, but inside the otherwise innocuous dresser was a small travel suitcase, which seemed inconspicuous among the other items in the room. After opening it, they discovered a large object wrapped in kitchen foil inside the suitcase. When they opened the foil, they were met with a horrifying and heartbreaking truth. Wilma's severed head had been carefully wrapped and tied with tape inside the foil. The travel case, containing evidence of Wilma's horrific events, was sent to the Gothenburg Forensic Laboratory for further examination. A detailed examination revealed Tishko's fingerprints, which linked him to the heinous act. The investigation revealed the shocking brutality of the crime. Although pathologists were unable to determine Wilma's exact cause of death, they discovered severe injuries to her head and eyes caused by blunt force trauma. The decapitation had also caused further head injuries. Wilma's family was devastated by her news. Her mother, Linda, joined the search efforts for the rest of Wilma's body. The family was confronted with horrifying details of the case, including evidence found on the walls of the apartment. It became clear that Wilma's final moments may have taken place in the living room, where she was violently attacked. A severe blow to the head ended her life, leaving a haunting reminder of the violence. Swedish police filed a report detailing Tishko's denial of Wilma's murder, strongly asserting his innocence. Despite Tishko's claims, police had enough evidence to charge him with the crime and his trial was set for May 2020. However, Wilma's body was not found during the trial. Tishko showed no remorse or emotion throughout the investigation. Reports revealed that he had a disturbing view of his ex-girlfriend, associating her with evil and making bizarre claims that she was working with the Democrats against then-US President Donald Trump. Tishko's bizarre obsession with the president led him to attempt to join Trump's campaign. But his application was rejected due to incomplete records. During his trial, his defense team attempted to argue that he was not guilty by reason of insanity, citing his bizarre beliefs and statements about Wilma as evidence. However, this defense was unsuccessful. On July 27, 2020, a court found Tishko Ahmed Shirzad, 23, guilty of the murder of 17-year-old Wilma Anderson and sentenced him to life in prison, which was later reduced to 18 years by an appeals court. The inexplicable reduction in sentence stems from the lack of concrete evidence to pinpoint the exact cause of Wilma's death or the course of events since her body was not there, a haunting absence that leaves important questions unanswered, hindering the pursuit of justice. In 2020, Wilma's funeral marked the sad end to her story, causing immense pain for her family.